In the primordial darkness that existed before time itself took form, before the first breath of creation stirred the cosmic waters, there was only the void, an infinite expanse of nothingness that contained within it the potential for everything. From this absolute emptiness, neither born nor created but eternally existing, emerged the consciousness that would come to be known as Shiva, the Mahadeva, the great god whose very essence defies the conventional understanding of origin and beginning. Unlike the structured genealogies that mark the births of other deities, Shiva's emergence represents something far more fundamental, the spontaneous manifestation of cosmic consciousness itself. The ancient texts speak of him not as one who was created, but as one who simply is, existing in a state that transcends the very concepts of birth and death that govern all other beings. This self-existent nature, known as Swayambhu, places Shiva in a unique position within the cosmic hierarchy. For while other deities may trace their origins to specific acts of creation or divine parentage, Shiva stands as the eternal witness to creation itself. The establishment of the Trimurti, the cosmic triad of Brahma the creator, Vishnu the preserver, and Shiva the destroyer, represents one of the most sophisticated theological concepts in ancient thought. Yet Shiva's role as the destroyer requires careful understanding, for destruction in the cosmic sense does not mean annihilation but transformation. He is the force that dissolves the old to make way for the new, the power that breaks down worn-out forms so that fresh possibilities can emerge. His dance of destruction is simultaneously a dance of creation, for in the cosmic cycle, ending and beginning are not opposites but complementary aspects of the same eternal process. This transformative power manifests most clearly in Shiva's role as Nataraja, the cosmic dancer whose rhythmic movements maintain the universe in constant motion. His dance represents the eternal flow of energy that keeps the cosmos alive, the pulsation of stars, the rotation of planets, the cycle of seasons, and the rhythm of life and death that governs all existence. Each movement of his limbs sends ripples through the fabric of reality, creating new worlds while simultaneously dissolving others that have completed their cosmic purpose. The profound mystery of Shiva's nature becomes even more complex when we encounter his manifestation as Ardhanarishvara, the half-male, half-female form that represents the fundamental unity underlying all apparent duality. This extraordinary form, where the right half of the divine body appears as Shiva in his masculine aspect, while the left half manifests as Shakti in her feminine form, reveals one of the deepest truths about the nature of reality itself. In this remarkable manifestation, Shiva's right side displays the characteristic features of the ascetic god, the matted hair piled high in a top knot, the third eye blazing within a fire, the strong muscular frame adorned with ash and rudraksha beads, and the tiger skin wrapped around the waist. The masculine half embodies consciousness in its pure form, the witnessing awareness that observes but remains unchanged by the constant flux of phenomena. The left half, representing Shakti, presents an entirely different but complementary energy. Here we see the graceful curves of the feminine form, adorned with silk garments and golden ornaments, the hair flowing in elaborate braids decorated with flowers, and the gentle yet powerful expression that speaks of creative force and nurturing energy. This feminine aspect represents the dynamic power of manifestation, the creative energy that brings consciousness into active expression. The Ardhanarishvara form teaches that consciousness and energy, spirit and matter, male and female principles are not separate entities competing for dominance, but rather two aspects of a single reality. The masculine represents the unchanging witness consciousness, while the feminine embodies the dynamic creative power that manifests the universe. Neither can exist without the other. Consciousness without energy remains inert, while energy without consciousness becomes chaotic and destructive. This unity of opposites extends beyond gender symbolism to encompass all dualities that appear to divide existence: light and dark, creation and destruction, stillness and movement, transcendence and immanence. The Ardhanarishvara form demonstrates that these apparent opposites are actually complementary aspects of a deeper unity, and that true understanding comes not from choosing one side over the other, but from recognizing their fundamental interconnectedness. The implications of this teaching penetrate every aspect of existence. In the natural world, we see this principle at work in the interplay between opposing forces: the sun and moon, day and night, summer and winter, growth and decay. In human psychology, it reflects the integration of rational and intuitive faculties, active and receptive modes of being, analytical and synthetic approaches to understanding. But perhaps the most profound demonstration of Shiva's supreme nature comes through the Lingodbhava legend, a mythological account that establishes his position as the ultimate reality beyond all other manifestations of divinity. This extraordinary tale unfolds during a cosmic dispute between Brahma and Vishnu, each claiming supremacy over the other in their roles as creator and preserver of the universe. As their argument intensified, threatening to destabilize the cosmic order itself, there suddenly appeared before them a massive column of blazing fire that seemed to stretch infinitely in both directions. This pillar of light possessed a luminosity that surpassed the combined radiance of 1,000 suns, yet its fire did not burn. Instead, it emanated a presence so profound that both Brahma and Vishnu fell silent in wonder. Curious to discover the source and extent of this mysterious phenomenon, the two deities decided to test its limits. Brahma, in his form as a swan, flew upward at tremendous speed, determined to find the top of the pillar. His flight continued for thousands of cosmic years, yet no matter how far he travelled, the column of fire stretched endlessly above him, showing no sign of termination. Meanwhile, Vishnu transformed himself into a great boar and began digging downward, seeking to find the base of the mysterious pillar. His descent took him through layer after layer of cosmic reality, past the foundations of countless worlds, yet still the column continued infinitely downward, defying all attempts to locate its bottom. After eons of fruitless searching, both deities returned to their starting point, humbled by their inability to fathom the extent of this cosmic phenomenon. It was then that the pillar began to transform, its fiery exterior gradually revealing the majestic form of Shiva himself, standing in perfect stillness, yet radiating an energy that encompassed all of creation. The god who emerged from the infinite pillar bore the marks of his cosmic nature, his body smeared with sacred ash that gleamed like stardust against his blue-tinged skin, his hair piled in a towering mass of matted locks, from which the crescent moon emerged like a jewel, and his third eye blazing with the fire of knowledge that could both create and destroy worlds. Around his neck coiled serpents that represented the cycles of time, while his forearms held the symbols of his cosmic functions: the drum that beats the rhythm of creation, the fire that transforms and purifies, and the gestures that grant both fearlessness and boons to his devotees. This manifestation as the infinite linga established Shiva's position as the ultimate reality that underlies and transcends all other forms of divinity. The linga itself represents the formless aspect of the divine, the pure consciousness that exists beyond all attributes and descriptions, yet which serves as the source and foundation for all manifest forms. The Lingodbhava legend carries profound philosophical implications that extend far beyond a simple demonstration of power. It reveals that ultimate reality cannot be grasped through intellectual effort or spiritual striving alone, but only through the recognition that the seeker and the sought are ultimately one. Brahma and Vishnu, despite their cosmic status and abilities, could not find the limits of Shiva because they were searching for something outside themselves, not recognizing that the infinite consciousness they sought was the very awareness through which they were searching. This teaching points to the fundamental truth that consciousness itself is limitless and cannot be objectified or measured. Just as the pillar of fire had no beginning or end, consciousness has no boundaries that can be discovered through external investigation. It is only when the search turns inward, when the seeker recognizes their own essential nature as consciousness itself, that the mystery resolves. The legend also establishes the principle that true spiritual authority comes not from claims or assertions, but from direct demonstration of transcendent reality. Shiva did not argue his case or present credentials, he simply manifested as the infinite presence that both Brahma and Vishnu recognized as their own ultimate source and ground. This self-revealing aspect of Shiva's nature connects directly to his identity as Swayambhu, the self-existent one who requires no external cause or creator. Unlike other deities who emerge from specific cosmic processes or divine genealogies, Shiva represents the spontaneous appearance of consciousness itself, not as something that comes into being, but as something that eternally is and occasionally reveals itself to those ready to perceive it. The concept of Swayambhu challenges conventional notions of causation and origin. In ordinary understanding, everything that exists must have been caused by something else, leading to an infinite regress of causes stretching back to some ultimate first cause. But Shiva as Swayambhu represents a different category of existence altogether, not something that was caused, but the very principle of existence itself, the ground of being from which all causes and effects emerge. This self-existent nature manifests in various ways throughout the mythological accounts. Shiva appears spontaneously wherever sincere seekers call upon him, materializes in response to genuine devotion, and reveals himself in forms perfectly suited to the understanding and needs of each individual. Yet these appearances are not creations or manifestations in the ordinary sense. They are revelations of what was always already present, like the sun becoming visible when clouds part. The implications of Shiva's self-existent nature extend to every aspect of spiritual understanding. If the ultimate reality is self-existent, then it cannot be attained through effort or achievement, for it is already the very ground of the one who seeks. This paradox, that what we seek is what we already are, forms the foundation of the deepest spiritual teachings associated with Shiva. The self-existent nature that manifests as Shiva's spontaneous appearances throughout cosmic history finds its most profound expression in his role as the eternal ascetic, the supreme practitioner of yoga, whose meditative consciousness serves as the very foundation of universal stability. High above the terrestrial realm, where the peaks of the Himalayas pierce the boundary between earth and sky, rises Mount Kailash, not merely a mountain but a cosmic axis around which the entire universe revolves. Upon its crystal summit, in a state of perfect stillness that has endured since the beginning of time, sits Shiva in his aspect as the great meditator, his consciousness absorbed in contemplation so deep that it sustains the very fabric of existence. This eternal meditation represents far more than personal spiritual practice. Shiva's contemplative state functions as the stabilizing force that maintains cosmic equilibrium, his unwavering awareness serving as the fixed point around which all change and transformation can safely occur. The ancient texts describe how his breath regulates the cosmic winds, how the rhythm of his heartbeat synchronizes with the pulsation of stars, and how the depth of his meditation creates the space within which all phenomena can arise and dissolve without disturbing the fundamental peace that underlies existence. The physical posture he maintains during this endless contemplation reveals the perfect integration of alertness and relaxation that characterizes true yogic mastery. His spine rises straight as mountain peak, each vertebra aligned with mathematical precision to allow the free flow of cosmic energy through his subtle body. His legs rest in the classical lotus position, feet placed upon opposite thighs with soles turned upward, creating a stable foundation that could remain undisturbed even if the earth itself were to shake. His hands rest in the gesture of deep meditation, palms upturned and fingers gently curved, neither grasping nor rejecting but maintaining perfect equipoise between all opposing forces. The half-closed eyes that gaze into infinite space demonstrate the unique quality of his awareness, neither fully withdrawn from the world nor completely engaged with external phenomena, but resting in that perfect balance point where inner and outer reality merge into a single seamless experience. Through these eyes, partially veiled by long lashes that cast shadows across his serene features, Shiva simultaneously witnesses the play of cosmic forces while remaining anchored in the unchanging consciousness that observes all change without being affected by it. His matted hair, piled high in elaborate coils that reach toward the heavens, contains within its tangled locks the accumulated power of countless ages of spiritual practice. Each strand has absorbed the vibrations of mantras repeated millions of times, the energy of pranayama practices that have regulated the cosmic breath, and the heat generated by tapasya so intense that it could melt mountains. From within this mass of sacred hair emerges the crescent moon, its cool light providing a counterbalance to the fierce fire of spiritual austerity, while the sacred river Ganga flows in an endless cascade, her waters blessed by contact with the divine consciousness before descending to purify the lower worlds. The third eye that blazes in the center of his forehead represents the culmination of yogic achievement, the opening of the inner vision that perceives reality as it truly is, beyond the veils of illusion that obscure ordinary perception. This eye of wisdom remains mostly closed during his meditation, its tremendous power held in perfect control, for when fully opened it possesses the capacity to reduce entire universes to ash through the fire of pure knowledge. The gentle glow that emanates from beneath its closed lid indicates the constant presence of enlightened awareness, always available but never imposed upon the cosmic play that unfolds within his consciousness. Through this eternal meditation, Shiva demonstrates mastery over the most fundamental forces that govern existence. Death, which appears to mortals as the ultimate limitation and source of fear, reveals itself to his yogic perception as merely another transformation within the endless dance of consciousness. His contemplative awareness encompasses not only the moment of death, but the entire cycle of dissolution and regeneration, perceiving how each ending contains the seed of a new beginning, and how apparent destruction serves the larger purpose of cosmic renewal. The legends speak of occasions when powerful demons or cosmic disturbances threaten to upset the universal balance, only to discover that their efforts were futile against the immovable foundation of Shiva's meditative consciousness. The demon Tripura, who constructed 3 flying cities of gold, silver and iron from which he terrorized the three worlds, found that his weapons and armies could not disturb the peace of one absorbed in perfect samadhi. The cosmic serpent Vasuki, whose movements could cause earthquakes throughout the universe, coiled respectfully around Shiva's neck, his venomous breath neutralized by proximity to consciousness so pure that no poison would affect it. Time itself, which governs the destiny of all other beings and determines the lifespan of the gods and demons alike, bends before Shiva's yogic mastery. His meditation exists outside the normal flow of temporal progression, creating a space of eternal now where past, present, and future converge into a single, timeless moment. This mastery over time manifests not as the ability to manipulate chronological sequence, but as the recognition that ultimate reality transcends temporal limitations altogether. From the perspective of his meditative awareness, the entire cosmic cycle, from the first stirring of creation through countless ages of development to the final dissolution, appears as a single instantaneous event, no more substantial than a wave arising and subsiding on the ocean of consciousness. The five elements that comprise the building blocks of all material existence, earth, water, fire, air, and space, respond to his contemplative mastery with complete obedience. Earth stabilizes beneath his seated form, providing an unshakable foundation that could support the weight of infinite worlds. Water flows around him in perfect harmony, neither flooding nor receding, but maintaining the precise balance necessary for life to flourish. Fire burns within his spiritual practice without consuming, its transformative power directed toward the purification of consciousness rather than the destruction of form. Air moves in gentle currents that carry his blessings throughout the universe, while space itself expands and contracts in rhythm with his breathing, creating room for new possibilities to emerge. This mastery emerges not from dominance or control in the ordinary sense, but from perfect alignment with the natural laws that govern cosmic functioning. Through his tapasya, the fierce spiritual discipline that burns away all limitations and impurities, Shiva has dissolved every trace of separation between his individual consciousness and the universal intelligence that orchestrates all phenomena. His meditation becomes a demonstration of how complete surrender to higher principles paradoxically results in supreme mastery over the forces that appear to limit other beings. The legendary accounts of his tapasya describe spiritual practices of such intensity that they generate heat capable of threatening the stability of entire cosmic systems. When Shiva enters the deepest phases of his spiritual discipline, the accumulated energy creates a blazing aura that extends far beyond the physical boundaries of Mount Kailash, its radiance visible to enlightened sages throughout the universe. This spiritual fire, known as tapas, possesses the power to burn through the most stubborn karmic obstacles, dissolve the most deeply rooted patterns of ignorance, and transform even the grossest material substances into pure consciousness. Yet this tremendous power remains perfectly controlled, never expressing itself in destructive ways unless cosmic necessity demands intervention. The fire of his tapasya burns with discrimination, consuming only what needs to be purified while leaving untouched whatever serves the greater good. Mountains may tremble at the intensity of his spiritual practice, but flowers continue to bloom in his presence. Birds nest fearlessly in the trees surrounding his meditation seat, and the gentle creatures of the high Himalayas find refuge in the peace that radiates from his contemplative absorption. From this foundation of supreme yogic mastery emerges Shiva's role as Adiyogi, the first and greatest of all yogis, the original teacher who transmitted the science of yoga to humanity through the 7 great sages known as the Saptarishis. The transmission of this knowledge represents one of the most significant events in the spiritual history of the universe, for it marked the moment when the highest realization became accessible to beings still caught in the cycles of birth and death, still subject to the limitations of individual embodiment. The 7 sages who received this transmission were themselves beings of extraordinary spiritual attainment, each having spent countless lifetimes preparing for this momentous encounter. They had purified their consciousness through rigorous practice, developed the subtle perception necessary to receive direct transmission of spiritual knowledge, and demonstrated the unwavering dedication required to preserve and propagate these teachings for the benefit of future generations. Their names, Kashyapa, Atri, Vasishtha, Vishwamitra, Gautama, Jamadagni and Bharadvaja, became synonymous with the highest levels of spiritual achievement, their lineages producing generations of realized masters who continued to transmit the yogic sciences throughout the ages. The actual transmission occurred not through ordinary verbal instruction, but through direct transfer of consciousness from teacher to student. Shiva, emerging from his deep meditation, gazed upon each of the 7 sages with eyes that contained the accumulated wisdom of eternity. In that gaze, the complete understanding of yoga, its philosophical foundations, practical methods, and ultimate goals, passed from the cosmic guru to his chosen disciples without the need for words or explanations. Each sage received the particular aspect of yogic knowledge most suited to his nature and the role he would play in disseminating these teachings throughout the world. The transmission of yogic knowledge to the 7 sages marked only the beginning of Shiva's multifaceted revelation to the cosmos, for his nature encompasses not merely the stillness of perfect meditation, but also the dynamic movement that keeps the universe in perpetual motion. This apparent contradiction between absolute stillness and ceaseless activity finds its resolution in one of the most profound aspects of his cosmic function, his manifestation as Nataraja, the cosmic dancer whose rhythmic movements orchestrate the fundamental processes of creation, preservation and destruction across infinite dimensions of existence. The dance of Nataraja represents the most sophisticated understanding of cosmic mechanics ever conceived, where every gesture, every step, every subtle movement of the divine form corresponds to specific universal processes that maintain the delicate balance between order and chaos. Unlike human dance that serves aesthetic or recreational purposes, Shiva's cosmic dance functions as the fundamental force that keeps reality itself in motion, his body serving as the instrument through which the abstract principles of cosmic law manifest as concrete phenomena throughout the multiple layers of existence. The Tandava, as this cosmic dance is known, operates on scales that dwarf human comprehension. Each complete cycle of the dance encompasses the birth and death of entire universes, with individual movements corresponding to the formation of galaxies, the ignition of stars, the evolution of planetary systems, and the emergence of life itself. The rhythm that governs this dance originates from the Damaru, the small hourglass-shaped drum that Shiva holds in his upper right hand, its beats marking not merely temporal intervals, but the fundamental pulsation that creates the fabric of space-time itself. The sound that emerges from this cosmic drum transcends ordinary auditory perception, representing instead the primordial vibration from which all other sounds, words and languages eventually emerge. This original sound, known as the unstruck sound or Anahata Nada, reverberates through every atom of creation, establishing the vibrational frequencies that determine the characteristics of different elements, the orbital patterns of celestial bodies, and the rhythmic cycles that govern biological processes throughout the universe. When the drum sounds, new worlds begin their journey toward manifestation. When its echoes fade, existing realms complete their destined cycles and dissolve back into the infinite potential from which they emerged. The physical form that Shiva assumes during this cosmic dance reveals the perfect integration of opposing forces that characterizes all stable systems in nature. His body maintains perfect balance while engaged in constant motion, each limb positioned with mathematical precision to counteract the forces generated by the others. The raised left leg extends gracefully toward the heavens, representing the soul's aspiration toward transcendence and liberation from the cycles of birth and death. This upward movement creates a dynamic tension with the firmly planted right foot, which rests upon the prostrate form of Apasmara, the demon of ignorance whose subjugation represents the triumph of knowledge over delusion. The demon beneath Shiva's foot assumes a peculiar position in this cosmic drama, for unlike other adversaries who face complete destruction, Apasmara remains perpetually subdued but never eliminated. This detail carries profound significance, indicating that ignorance serves a necessary function within the cosmic design, providing the contrast that makes knowledge meaningful and the resistance that makes spiritual growth possible. The pressure of Shiva's foot keeps this demon of delusion in perfect control, preventing it from overwhelming consciousness while ensuring its continued existence as a catalyst for spiritual development. The four arms of Nataraja extend in directions that correspond to the cardinal points of the compass, each hand holding or displaying symbols that represent different aspects of cosmic function. The upper right hand grasps the Damaru whose beats regulate universal rhythm, while the upper left hand holds a tongue of flame that represents the transformative fire of consciousness. This flame burns with a light that neither creates nor destroys in the conventional sense, but rather transforms one state of being into another, facilitating the endless metamorphosis through which the universe maintains its dynamic equilibrium. The lower right hand extends in the Abhaya Mudra, the gesture that grants fearlessness to all beings who witness the cosmic dance. This hand position communicates the fundamental message that despite the constant changes and apparent chaos of universal processes, an underlying intelligence guides all transformation toward ultimately beneficial outcomes. The gesture assures observers that the dance of creation and destruction follows patterns of cosmic wisdom rather than random chance, and that every being has the potential to align themselves with these beneficial forces through proper understanding and practice. The lower left hand points gracefully toward the raised foot, drawing attention to the path of liberation that remains eternally available to those who seek release from the cycles of limitation and suffering. This gesture, known as Gaya Hasta, mimics the trunk of an elephant and symbolizes the removal of obstacles that prevent spiritual progress. The hand's pointing motion indicates that liberation is not a distant goal to be achieved through external effort, but a present reality that can be recognized through the proper direction of attention and understanding. The hair of Nataraja streams outward from his head in wild profusion, each strand representing the flow of cosmic energy as it radiates throughout the universe. Within this flowing mass of hair appear various sacred elements: the crescent moon that moderates the intensity of spiritual fire, the sacred river Ganga whose waters purify all they touch, and small serpents that represent the subtle energies governing the cycles of time. The dynamic movement of this hair creates patterns that mirror the spiral structures found throughout nature, from the formation of galaxies to the growth patterns of plants to the double helix structure of genetic material. The face of Nataraja maintains an expression of perfect serenity despite the vigorous nature of the dance, the features composed in the deep peace that comes from complete mastery over all internal and external forces. The eyes remain half closed in the classical meditation posture, indicating that the cosmic dance emerges from the same profound stillness that characterizes his seated meditation on Mount Kailash. This integration of movement and stillness, activity and peace represents one of the highest teachings about the nature of enlightened action, that true mastery involves engaging fully with the world while remaining anchored in unshakable inner tranquility. The dance itself manifests in multiple forms, each corresponding to different phases of cosmic activity and serving distinct functions within the universal order. The Ananda Tandava, or Dance of Bliss, represents the joyous celebration that accompanies the successful completion of cosmic cycles, when the various forces of creation achieve perfect harmony and balance. During this dance, Shiva's movements flow with graceful ease, each gesture expressing the deep satisfaction that comes from witnessing the fulfillment of cosmic purpose. The rhythm becomes gentle and melodious, inspiring feelings of peace and contentment throughout all levels of existence. The Rudratandava presents a dramatically different energy, its fierce movements corresponding to the periods when cosmic correction becomes necessary to restore proper balance. When negative forces accumulate beyond acceptable limits, when ignorance threatens to overwhelm knowledge, or when the natural order faces disruption from demonic influences, Shiva's dance assumes this more vigorous form. The movements become sharp and decisive, the rhythm intensifies to match the urgency of cosmic intervention, and the very air around the dancing figure begins to shimmer with transformative energy. During the Rudra Tandava, Shiva's hair whips through space like tongues of fire. His limbs move with the precision of cosmic weapons, and his eyes flash with the intensity of lightning illuminating storm clouds. The sound of his footsteps reverberates through multiple dimensions, causing mountains to tremble and oceans to surge, while the beat of his drum becomes so powerful that it can shatter the foundations of demonic strongholds. Yet even in this fierce aspect, the dance maintains perfect control and discrimination, directing its transformative force only toward those elements that require correction or elimination. The third major form, known as Lasya, represents the gentle, nurturing aspect of cosmic dance that facilitates growth, healing, and the gradual development of consciousness. This dance typically manifests when Shiva assumes his Ardhanarishvara form, integrating masculine and feminine energies to create the perfect conditions for new life to emerge and flourish. The movements become fluid and graceful, resembling the gentle swaying of trees in a spring breeze or the rhythmic lapping of waves against a peaceful shore. During Lasya, the cosmic dance takes on qualities traditionally associated with feminine energy, receptivity, nurturing, and the patient cultivation of potential into actuality. The rhythm becomes more complex and subtle, incorporating intricate patterns that mirror the delicate processes through which consciousness develops from simple awareness into sophisticated understanding. This aspect of the dance particularly governs the formation of new species, the evolution of planetary ecosystems, and the gradual awakening of spiritual awareness in individual beings. The most famous manifestation of Shiva's cosmic dance occurred in the sacred grove of Tillai, later known as Chidambaram, where the cosmic dancer engaged in a legendary contest that would establish the supremacy of divine consciousness over the forces of ignorance and spiritual darkness. This extraordinary event began when a group of sages, despite their supposed wisdom and spiritual attainment, fell prey to the subtle pride that can corrupt even advanced practitioners, leading them to believe that their ritual knowledge and ceremonial practices were sufficient to command the respect and obedience of the divine powers. These sages had established their ashram in the heart of a dense forest, where they performed elaborate fire sacrifices and conducted complex rituals designed to accumulate spiritual merit and demonstrate their mastery over cosmic forces. Their practices had indeed generated considerable power, creating an atmosphere of heightened spiritual energy that attracted various celestial beings and minor deities to witness their ceremonies. However, this success gradually fostered an attitude of spiritual arrogance, causing them to forget that true wisdom involves humility before the infinite mystery of existence. When reports of their growing pride reached the cosmic realms, Shiva decided to provide a direct demonstration of the difference between ritual knowledge and genuine spiritual realization. Assuming the form of a wandering ascetic whose appearance deliberately contradicted conventional expectations of holiness, he approached their sacred grove accompanied by Vishnu, who had taken the form of an enchanting woman whose beauty surpassed that of the celestial Apsaras. The ascetic who entered their midst bore none of the external marks that the sages associated with spiritual authority. His body was smeared with ash from cremation grounds. Rather than the sanctified substances used in their rituals, his hair hung in wild, unkempt locks rather than the carefully groomed styles they maintained, and his clothing consisted of simple bark garments rather than the elaborate robes that marked their ceremonial status. Most disturbing to their conventional sensibilities, he carried a begging bowl made from a human skull and was accompanied by various spirits and supernatural beings whose presence violated their strict rules of ritual purity. The beautiful woman who accompanied the strange ascetic created an even greater disturbance within their ordered community. Her presence awakened desires that the sages had believed themselves to have transcended through years of disciplined practice, revealing the superficial nature of their supposed detachment from worldly attractions. As she moved through their ashram with fluid grace, her very presence exposed the gap between their theoretical understanding of spiritual principles and their actual level of realization. The sage's reaction to these visitors revealed the extent to which pride had corrupted their spiritual understanding. Rather than recognizing the divine nature concealed beneath unconventional appearances, they responded with anger and indignation, viewing the presence of these strangers as a deliberate insult to their spiritual status and religious authority. Their wives and disciples, meanwhile, found themselves inexplicably drawn to the mysterious visitors, their hearts stirring with emotions that transcended rational explanation. Determined to demonstrate their power and drive away these unwelcome intruders, the sages began performing aggressive rituals designed to destroy or subdue the strangers through magical means. They kindled fierce sacrificial fires, chanted powerful mantras of binding and banishment, and created through their ceremonial practices a series of supernatural weapons and demonic entities intended to overwhelm the interlopers through sheer magical force. From their sacrificial fire emerged first a fearsome tiger, its eyes blazing with supernatural fury, and its claws capable of tearing through the strongest armor. The beast leaped toward the strange ascetic with killing intent, but as it reached him, he simply caught it with one hand, stripped off its skin with a casual gesture, and draped the hide around his waist like a garment. The tiger's fierce energy, rather than being destroyed, became integrated into his own power, adding to rather than diminishing his cosmic authority. Undeterred by this first failure, the sages intensified their efforts, producing from their fire a massive serpent whose venom could poison entire rivers and whose coils possessed the strength to crush mountains. This creature, larger and more terrible than any natural snake, struck at the ascetic with lightning speed, its fangs dripping with toxins that could kill gods themselves. Yet as it reached its target, the stranger simply grasped it gently and placed it around his neck like an ornament. The serpent's deadly nature transformed into a symbol of mastery over time and death. Growing desperate, the sages summoned their most powerful creation, a fierce dwarf demon armed with a blazing club and possessed of strength sufficient to challenge the gods themselves. This creature, known as Apasmara, embodied the concentrated force of ignorance and delusion, representing all the mental obstacles that prevent beings from recognizing their true nature. The demon attacked with savage fury, its club striking with enough force to shatter celestial weapons. Yet the mysterious ascetic received its assault with perfect calm. Rather than engaging in violent combat, Shiva simply stepped upon the demon's back, pinning it to the earth with his right foot while maintaining perfect balance and composure. This action represented not the destruction of ignorance, but its proper subjugation, keeping the forces of delusion under control while recognizing their necessary function within the cosmic design. The demon continued to struggle beneath his foot, but its movements now served only to provide the resistance against which the cosmic dance could unfold. With the demon thus subdued, Shiva began the dance that would demonstrate the true nature of cosmic authority and spiritual mastery. His movements started slowly, each gesture precisely calculated to reveal different aspects of universal truth to the assembled sages. As the dance progressed, his body began to emit a radiance that surpassed the combined light of all their sacrificial fires, while the rhythm of his steps created vibrations that harmonized with the fundamental frequencies underlying all existence. The cosmic dance that unfolded in the forest of Tillai transcended anything the sages had previously witnessed or imagined. Each movement of Shiva's limbs created visible ripples in the fabric of space itself, while the sound of his footsteps resonated through multiple dimensions of reality simultaneously. The very elements responded to his dance. Fire blazed more brightly, water flowed in perfect spirals, earth stabilized beneath his feet, air moved in harmonious currents, and space itself seemed to expand and contract in rhythm with his breathing. As the dance intensified, the boundaries between different levels of reality began to dissolve, revealing the underlying unity that connects all apparently separate phenomena. The sages found themselves witnessing not merely a physical performance, but a direct demonstration of the cosmic principles they had studied in their scriptures, now made manifest through divine movement and gesture. The theoretical knowledge they had accumulated through years of study suddenly revealed its practical application as they observed how consciousness itself moves to create, sustain, and transform the universe. The climax of this cosmic demonstration occurred when Shiva raised his left leg high above his head in the movement known as the Urdhva Tandava, a pose that requires perfect balance, absolute flexibility, and complete mastery over the physical form. This gesture, impossible for ordinary beings to achieve or maintain, represented the soul's ultimate aspiration toward liberation from all limitations and constraints. As his foot reached its highest point, pointing directly toward the infinite space above, a blazing light erupted from his entire form, illuminating not only the physical forest, but also the subtle realms that interpenetrate material existence. In that moment of supreme revelation, the assembled sages recognized the true identity of their mysterious visitor. their pride dissolving instantly in the face of undeniable divine presence. They fell prostrate before Nataraja, their previous arrogance transformed into genuine humility, and their ritual knowledge revealed as merely the outer shell of spiritual understanding. The cosmic dancer had accomplished his purpose not through punishment or destruction, but through direct demonstration of the difference between mere learning and authentic realization. The establishment of cosmic order through this dance in Tillai created a permanent sacred space where the boundaries between different dimensions of existence remain perpetually thin, allowing seekers in future ages to access direct experience of cosmic consciousness through proper preparation and sincere devotion. The very ground where Shiva danced became sanctified by contact with his feet, creating a vortex of spiritual energy that continues to facilitate transformation and awakening for those who approach with appropriate understanding. This legendary dance also demonstrated Shiva's role as the supreme arbiter of cosmic justice, whose interventions serve not to punish but to educate, not to destroy but to transform. The sages who had fallen into spiritual pride received exactly the teaching they needed to progress beyond their limitations, while the cosmic order itself was strengthened through the demonstration of divine authority over all forms of ignorance and delusion. The symbolism embedded within every aspect of this cosmic dance reveals layers of meaning that continue to unfold as consciousness develops the capacity to perceive more subtle dimensions of truth. The forest setting represents the wild, untamed aspects of existence that resist conventional ordering, while the fire sacrifices of the sages symbolize the human attempt to control cosmic forces through ritual and ceremony. The transformation of their aggressive magical creations into ornaments and symbols of divine power illustrates how apparent obstacles become sources of strength when approached with proper understanding. The cosmic dance that established divine authority in the sacred grove of Tillai represented only one facet of Shiva's multidimensional existence, for even as he maintained his role as the supreme ascetic, absorbed in eternal meditation and the cosmic dancer orchestrating universal processes, another aspect of his divine nature began to unfold through the mysterious workings of cosmic love. This development would challenge conventional understanding of detachment and involvement, revealing how the highest spiritual realization could coexist with the most profound emotional connection, and how divine consciousness itself could experience the transformative power of love without compromising its essential nature. The emergence of this romantic dimension began with Daksha, one of the Prajapatis or cosmic progenitors responsible for populating the universe with various forms of life. Daksha possessed extraordinary creative powers and had successfully generated numerous offspring who went on to become the ancestors of gods, demons, humans, and other species that filled the cosmic realms. His approach to creation emphasized order, hierarchy, and adherence to established protocols, making him a master of systematic manifestation, but also somewhat rigid in his understanding of how cosmic processes should unfold. Among Daksha's many daughters, one stood apart from all others in both beauty and spiritual inclination. Named Sati, meaning she who is, this remarkable being possessed qualities that transcended ordinary divine nature, embodying within her individual form the very principle of cosmic energy that serves as the dynamic complement to pure consciousness. Her physical beauty surpassed that of celestial nymphs and goddesses, with features so perfectly proportioned that they seem to have been crafted by cosmic forces specifically to embody the aesthetic ideals that inspire art and poetry throughout the universe. Her eyes, large and luminous, held depths that reflected the infinite space of cosmic consciousness, while her complexion possessed the golden radiance of dawn breaking over sacred mountains. Her hair flowed in waves that caught light like flowing water, and her movements carried the natural grace of someone whose every gesture remained in perfect harmony with universal rhythms. Yet these external attributes, magnificent as they appeared, served merely as expressions of the extraordinary spiritual power that constituted her true essence. From earliest childhood, Sati displayed an inexplicable attraction to Shiva that defied rational explanation and concerned her father considerably. While other divine maidens occupied themselves with conventional pursuits appropriate to their celestial status, Sati spent her time in meditation and spiritual practices that seemed designed to prepare her for union with the cosmic consciousness that Shiva represented. She would sit for hours in perfect stillness, her awareness turned inward toward the source of existence itself, and during these meditative periods, her individual consciousness would merge so completely with universal awareness that observers could detect no trace of separate selfhood remaining. This spiritual orientation manifested in her daily activities as well. Rather than adorning herself with the elaborate ornaments and costly garments that befitted her status as daughter of a cosmic progenitor, Sati preferred simple clothing and minimal decoration, finding greater satisfaction in practices that cultivated inner beauty and spiritual radiance. She demonstrated remarkable knowledge of sacred texts and philosophical principles, despite having received no formal instruction in these subjects, as if the wisdom contained in these teachings arose spontaneously from her own direct experience of cosmic truth. Her devotion to Shiva began manifesting in ways that puzzled and alarmed Daksha, who had assumed his daughter would eventually marry one of the prominent gods or celestial beings whose union would strengthen political alliances and enhance his own cosmic status. Instead, Sati spent increasing amounts of time in practices specifically designed to attract Shiva's attention and demonstrate her worthiness to become his consort. She performed severe austerities that would have challenged experienced ascetics, maintained fasts that lasted for cosmic ages, and engaged in meditation so deep that her body would remain motionless for periods that spanned the rise and fall of civilizations. The intensity of her spiritual practices generated tremendous heat and energy that began affecting the cosmic environment around Daksha's realm. Mountains in the vicinity started glowing within a fire. Rivers changed their courses to flow in patterns that spelled out sacred names, and the very air became charged with spiritual electricity that made ordinary beings feel simultaneously uplifted and overwhelmed. These phenomena convinced Daksha that his daughter's obsession with the wild ascetic of Mount Kailash threatened to disrupt the orderly cosmic processes he worked so diligently to maintain. Daksha's opposition to this potential union stemmed from fundamental differences in understanding about the nature of cosmic order and spiritual authority. As a being whose identity centered on systematic creation and a hierarchical organization, he found Shiva's unconventional appearance and behavior deeply disturbing. The great ascetic's habit of smearing his body with ash from cremation grounds violated every principle of ritual purity that Daksha considered essential for maintaining cosmic stability. His association with ghosts, spirits, and other beings that existed outside conventional social structures suggested a dangerous disregard for the boundaries that kept different realms of existence properly separated. Most troubling to Daksha was Shiva's apparent indifference to the elaborate ceremonies and formal protocols that governed relationships between cosmic beings. The ascetic lord showed no interest in participating in the grand assemblies where gods gathered to discuss universal affairs, demonstrated no concern for maintaining the diplomatic relationships that ensured smooth cooperation between different divine hierarchies, and seemed entirely unmoved by the honours and recognition that motivated other celestial beings. This attitude struck Daksha as fundamentally antisocial and potentially subversive to the established order that enabled the universe to function harmoniously. Despite her father's growing disapproval, Sati's spiritual practices continued intensifying until they reached levels that began affecting cosmic stability on a universal scale. The heat generated by her tapasya created disturbances in the subtle energy patterns that regulated seasonal cycles, causing unseasonable weather patterns and disrupting the delicate balance between different elemental forces. Her meditation became so profound that it created gravitational effects, causing celestial bodies to alter their orbits slightly as they responded to the concentrated spiritual energy emanating from her contemplative absorption. These cosmic disturbances eventually attracted Shiva's attention, drawing his awareness away from his own eternal meditation to investigate the source of energies so powerful they could influence universal processes. When his consciousness touched hers during one of her deepest meditative states, the contact created an instantaneous recognition that transcended ordinary attraction or compatibility. In that moment of spiritual meeting, both beings recognized their essential unity, not as separate individuals choosing to come together, but as complementary aspects of a single cosmic principle that had temporarily appeared to be divided. The recognition sparked a transformation in both divine beings that affected not only their individual natures, but the fundamental structure of cosmic reality itself. Shiva's consciousness, which had existed in perfect self-sufficiency since the beginning of time, suddenly discovered within itself a capacity for relationship that enhanced rather than diminished its essential completeness. Sati's individual awareness, which had always felt like a fragment seeking reunion with its source, found in this connection the fulfillment of its deepest spiritual aspirations, while simultaneously maintaining its unique perspective and creative power. This mutual recognition initiated a cosmic courtship that unfolded across dimensions of reality, normally invisible to ordinary perception. Their interactions took place simultaneously on physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual levels, each exchange deepening their understanding of how individual identity could coexist with perfect unity. Shiva would appear to Sati during her meditations not as the fierce ascetic that others perceived, but as the embodiment of infinite consciousness whose presence filled her awareness with indescribable bliss and understanding. During these mystical encounters, Sati experienced directly how consciousness and energy interweave to create the fabric of existence itself. She perceived how Shiva's awareness provided the stable foundation upon which all phenomena could arise and dissolve, while her own nature supplied the dynamic creativity that transformed potential into actuality. Their union represented not the merger of two separate beings, but the recognition of their eternal inseparability, like the sun and its radiance or the ocean and its waves. The cosmic implications of their developing relationship began manifesting in observable changes throughout the universe. Regions that had remained barren for cosmic ages suddenly burst into bloom as the creative energy generated by their love flowed through previously dormant areas of space. New species of beings began appearing spontaneously, their forms embodying perfect integration of masculine and feminine principles that reflected the divine couple's harmonious union. even the quality of light throughout the universe became more refined and beautiful, as if the very photons were being influenced by the love that connected consciousness and energy at the most fundamental level. When Shiva finally descended from Mount Kailash to formally request Sati's hand in marriage, his arrival created phenomena that demonstrated the transformative power of divine love. The mountain peaks along his route began resonating with musical tones that created spontaneous symphonies of unprecedented beauty, while flowers bloomed out of season and streams began flowing uphill as the natural order responded joyfully to the presence of love in its highest form. His usual retinue of ghosts and spirits appeared transformed by proximity to this elevated emotional state, their normally frightening aspects becoming sources of wonder and inspiration rather than terror. The wedding ceremony that united Shiva and Sati transcended conventional ritual to become a cosmic event that established new possibilities for how consciousness and energy could interact throughout the universe. The ceremony took place simultaneously on multiple planes of existence, with participants including not only gods and celestial beings, but also representatives from every level of cosmic manifestation. The very elements served as witnesses, with earth providing stability, water offering purification, fire blessing the union with transformative power, air carrying prayers and good wishes throughout all realms, and space itself expanding to accommodate the increased love and harmony generated by their marriage. During the wedding rituals, Sati's true nature as Adi Shakti, the primordial cosmic energy, became fully manifest for the first time since the beginning of creation. Her individual form served as a focal point through which the infinite creative power of the universe could express itself in personal relationship with pure consciousness. This revelation transformed understanding throughout the cosmic realms about the nature of ultimate reality, demonstrating that the highest spiritual attainment involved not the transcendence of relationship, but its perfection through divine love. The early period of their marriage established Mount Kailash as the supreme sacred space where the integration of consciousness and energy could be directly experienced by qualified seekers. Their presence together created an atmosphere of such spiritual intensity that merely approaching their dwelling place could trigger profound transformations in visiting beings. The mountain itself became a living temple where every rock, stream and patch of vegetation pulsed with the harmonious energy generated by their perfect union. Their daily interactions demonstrated how divine beings could maintain both individual identity and complete unity simultaneously. Shiva continued his cosmic functions as the supreme yogi and cosmic dancer, while Sati expressed her nature as the creative power that manifested and sustained universal processes. Yet these apparently separate activities occurred within a field of shared consciousness that made their every action a collaborative expression of unified divine will. The happiness and harmony of their early married life created ripple effects throughout all levels of existence, inspiring other beings to seek similar integration of their own masculine and feminine aspects. The cosmic realms experienced a golden age of creativity and spiritual development as gods, sages, and even ordinary mortals found themselves naturally drawn toward practices that balance contemplative awareness with dynamic engagement in life's activities. However, this period of cosmic harmony contained within it the seeds of a tragedy that would test the very foundations of divine love and reveal depths of spiritual truth that could only emerge through the crucible of ultimate loss. Daksha's disapproval of his daughter's marriage had not diminished with time, but had instead festered into a resentment that gradually poisoned his relationship not only with Shiva, but with the cosmic order itself. his inability to accept that true spiritual authority might manifest in forms that challenge conventional expectations led him to begin planning an event that would publicly demonstrate his rejection of Shiva's status, and he hoped humiliate the ascetic lord before the assembled cosmic community. The opportunity for this demonstration arose when Daksha decided to perform a grand yajna, a cosmic fire sacrifice designed to honour all the major gods and celestial beings, while simultaneously displaying his own importance as a cosmic progenitor. The scale of this ceremony surpassed anything previously attempted, with preparations involving the construction of the elaborate ritual grounds, the gathering of sacred materials from throughout the universe, and the invitation of every significant divine being to participate in the festivities. The deliberate exclusion of Shiva from this grand assembly represented more than personal spite. It constituted a direct challenge to the cosmic order itself, an attempt to reorganize universal hierarchy according to Daksha's limited understanding of spiritual authority. By inviting every other major deity while pointedly omitting the Lord of Mount Kailash, Daksha sought to demonstrate that conventional propriety and social respectability mattered more than the transcendent realization that Shiva embodied. When news of the great yajna reached Mount Kailash, Sati's reaction revealed the depth of her love and the intensity of her identification with her husband's honour. The insult to Shiva struck her not as an attack on a separate individual, but as an assault on the very principle of cosmic consciousness that she served and embodied. Her divine nature, which normally expressed itself through gentle creativity and nurturing energy, suddenly blazed with the fierce protective power that emerges when fundamental spiritual principles face deliberate violation. The cosmic flames that consumed Sati's physical form at Daksha's yajna did not mark an ending, but rather initiated a transformation that would demonstrate the indestructible nature of divine love and the eternal persistence of cosmic energy through all apparent deaths and dissolutions. The very essence that had manifested as Daksha's daughter could not be destroyed by fire, no matter how intense, for it represented the fundamental creative power of the universe itself, a force that might change form but could never cease to exist. In the cosmic realms beyond ordinary perception, where the laws governing physical manifestation operate according to different principles than those familiar to mortal beings, Sati's consciousness began preparing for a new incarnation that would allow her to resume her eternal relationship with Shiva. This preparation involved not merely the selection of appropriate parents and circumstances, but the careful orchestration of cosmic conditions that would facilitate her spiritual development and eventual recognition of her true identity. The choice of Himavan, the personification of the Himalayan mountain range itself, as her father in this new incarnation, reflected the profound wisdom that governs such divine rebirths. Himavan possessed qualities that made him an ideal parent for one destined to reunite with the Lord of Mount Kailash. His nature embodied the stability and endurance of mountains, the purity of high altitudes where the air itself seems charged with spiritual energy, and the serene majesty that characterizes those peaks where earth reaches toward heaven. Himavan's wife, Mena, represented the nurturing aspect of mountain energy, the fertile valleys where rivers originate, the meadows where rare flowers bloom in brief but spectacular displays, and the caves that provide shelter for sages and ascetics seeking solitude for their spiritual practices. Together, this divine couple created an environment perfectly suited for raising a daughter whose destiny involved the most challenging spiritual practices and the ultimate reunion with cosmic consciousness itself. When the child who would be known as Parvati took birth in their mountain realm, Her arrival was accompanied by phenomena that clearly indicated her extraordinary nature. The moment of her birth coincided with the simultaneous blooming of every flower species found throughout the Himalayan region, creating a spectacular display of colour and fragrance that lasted for 7 days and nights. Sacred springs that had remained dry for centuries suddenly began flowing with crystal clear water that possessed healing properties, while the very rocks and cliffs began emanating a subtle luminosity that made the entire mountain range appear to glow from within. The infant herself displayed characteristics that immediately distinguished her from ordinary divine children. Her eyes, even in the first moments after birth, held a depth of awareness that suggested the presence of ancient wisdom temporarily veiled by the innocence of childhood. Her complexion possessed the golden hue of sunrise, touching mountain peaks, while her hair grew with unusual rapidity into lustrous black waves that seemed to capture and reflect light in patterns that reminded observers of flowing water or dancing flames. As Parvati grew from infancy into childhood, her unique spiritual inclinations became increasingly apparent to her parents and the various sages and celestial beings who visited their mountain domain. Unlike other divine children who typically showed interest in games, ornaments, and the pleasures appropriate to their celestial status, Parvati demonstrated an almost instinctive attraction to spiritual practices and philosophical discussions that would challenge mature practitioners. She would spend hours sitting in perfect meditation posture beside mountain streams, her young form so still that birds would perch on her shoulders and small animals would gather around her without fear. During these periods of contemplation, her consciousness would naturally turn towards something or someone that existed beyond the immediate environment, as if she were seeking reunion with a presence that her conscious mind could not yet identify, but that her deeper nature recognized as essential to her completeness. Her questions to visiting sages revealed an understanding of cosmic principles that exceeded what could be expected from someone of her apparent age and experience. She would inquire about the nature of consciousness, the relationship between individual identity and universal awareness, and the spiritual practices that could lead to direct realization of ultimate truth. These conversations often left learned teachers amazed at the sophistication of her insights and the precision with which she grasped concepts that typically required years of study to comprehend. As she entered her adolescence, Parvati's spiritual yearning began focusing more specifically on Shiva, though initially this attraction manifested as intellectual curiosity about the legendary ascetic whose reputation had spread throughout the cosmic realms. She would question every sage and celestial visitor about his teachings, his spiritual achievements, and the profound meditation that he maintained on distant Mount Kailash. These inquiries gradually revealed that her interest transcended mere scholarly curiosity and reflected a deep personal connection that she could not yet fully understand or explain. The transformation from general spiritual seeking to specific devotion to Shiva occurred during a visit from Narada, the cosmic sage whose function involved facilitating divine connections and orchestrating events that served the larger purposes of cosmic evolution. Narada possessed the unique ability to perceive the subtle karmic threads that connected beings across multiple lifetimes, and when he encountered Parvati, he immediately recognized her true identity as the reincarnation of Sati. Rather than revealing this truth directly, which might have created psychological complications that could interfere with her natural spiritual development, Narada chose to nurture her growing attraction to Shiva through carefully crafted stories and teachings that would awaken her dormant memories gradually and naturally. He described Shiva's cosmic functions as Nataraja, his role as the supreme yogi, and his profound meditation that sustained universal stability, presenting these accounts in ways that resonated deeply with something in Parvati's consciousness that recognized their fundamental truth. The impact of these revelations on Parvati was immediate and dramatic. Her previous spiritual practices, already intense by ordinary standards, suddenly deepened into a focused tapasya, specifically designed to attract Shiva's attention and demonstrate her worthiness to become his consort. This transition marked the beginning of the most rigorous spiritual discipline ever undertaken by a divine being, practices so severe that they would generate cosmic disturbances and ultimately compel the attention of the very consciousness she sought to reach. The tapasya that Parvati began performing involved multiple forms of austerity simultaneously, each designed to purify different aspects of her being and align her consciousness with the transcendent awareness that Shiva represented. She adopted a diet consisting only of fruits and roots gathered from the highest mountain peaks, substances so rare and difficult to obtain that maintaining this regimen required tremendous dedication and physical endurance. As her practices intensified, she further restricted her nourishment to consuming only fallen leaves, then only water, and finally subsisting on nothing but air itself, demonstrating mastery over the physical form that approached the level achieved by the greatest yogic masters. Her meditation practices during this period surpassed anything previously witnessed in the mountain realms. She would maintain unbroken concentration for periods lasting entire seasons, her body remaining so perfectly still that snow would accumulate around her without causing the slightest movement or disturbance. During the hottest summer months, she would sit surrounded by blazing fires that intensified the already scorching heat, while in winter she would remain motionless despite freezing temperatures that would challenge even the most experienced ascetics. The mental discipline required for such practices involved the complete transcendence of ordinary psychological processes. Parvati learned to maintain awareness of her spiritual goal while simultaneously detaching from all personal desires, fears, and expectations that might interfere with perfect surrender to divine will. Her consciousness gradually expanded beyond individual boundaries to encompass increasingly vast dimensions of cosmic awareness, preparing her to recognize and unite with the infinite consciousness that constituted Shiva's essential nature. The physical effects of this extreme tapasya began manifesting in ways that demonstrated the tremendous spiritual energy being generated through her practices. Her body, despite receiving minimal nourishment, began radiating a golden light that illuminated the surrounding landscape even during the darkest nights. This luminosity possessed qualities that transcended ordinary illumination, carrying within its rays vibrations that could heal sickness, purify negative emotions, and inspire spiritual aspiration in all beings who encountered it. The heat generated by her spiritual practices created microclimatic changes throughout the region where she maintained her austerities. Snow melted in perfect circles around her meditation seat, creating patches of green vegetation that bloomed out of season, while the air itself became charged with energy that made breathing feel like consuming nectar. Sacred springs began emerging from previously dry ground, their waters carrying the spiritual vibrations generated by her tapasya to distant locations where they would benefit other seekers and spiritual practitioners. As her practices continued intensifying over years that stretched into decades, the cosmic implications of her tapasya began affecting universal processes in ways that could not be ignored by the gods and other celestial beings responsible for maintaining cosmic stability. The concentrated spiritual energy she was generating created gravitational effects that influenced the orbits of planets and the flow patterns of cosmic winds, while the heat of her austerities began affecting the temperature balance that regulated seasonal cycles throughout multiple star systems. These disturbances eventually reached such intensity that they began threatening the delicate equilibrium that enabled the universe to function harmoniously. Mountains began glowing with reflected energy from her practices, oceans started evaporating at accelerated rates, and the very fabric of space-time began showing signs of stress under the pressure of the concentrated spiritual force she was generating. The gods, recognizing that intervention was necessary to prevent cosmic catastrophe, decided to approach Shiva directly and request that he acknowledge Parvati's devotion before her tapasya destroyed the universal order itself. However, Shiva remained absorbed in his own eternal meditation, his consciousness so deeply withdrawn into transcendent awareness that he appeared completely oblivious to the cosmic disturbances occurring around him. The god's attempt to attract his attention through conventional means proved futile, as his meditative absorption had reached levels where ordinary stimuli could not penetrate the profound stillness of his contemplative state. Recognizing that extraordinary measures were required to awaken Shiva from his meditation, the gods decided to enlist the assistance of Kamadeva, the deity whose function involved generating the attraction and desire that motivated beings throughout the universe to form the relationships necessary for continued creation and cosmic evolution. Kamadeva possessed unique powers that enabled him to influence even the most detached consciousness, using subtle energies that could awaken dormant emotions and inspire recognition of the beauty and love. Kamadeva's appearance embodied the aesthetic perfection that naturally evokes appreciation and attraction in all beings capable of perceiving beauty. His youthful form displayed ideal proportions that seemed to have been crafted specifically to appeal to every possible standard of physical attractiveness, while his complexion possessed the warm golden hue of perpetual springtime. His eyes held depths that reflected infinite tenderness and understanding, while his smile conveyed the gentle humour and joy that characterized those who have mastered the art of inspiring love without becoming attached to its outcomes. His primary weapon consisted of a bow crafted from sugarcane, its string made from a line of buzzing bees whose humming created musical tones that could penetrate even the most guarded hearts. The arrows in his quiver were fashioned from flowers that never wilted, each one designed to awaken specific types of emotional response depending on the nature of the target and the circumstances requiring intervention. These floral projectiles possessed the power to inspire everything from gentle affection to overwhelming passion, their effects calibrated precisely to serve the larger purposes of cosmic harmony and evolution. Accompanied by his consort Rati, who embodied the fulfillment and satisfaction that complete love relationships provide, and his friend Vasanta, the personification of spring whose presence brought renewal and fresh possibilities to any environment, Kamadeva approached Mount Kailash with considerable apprehension. He understood that his mission involved awakening forces within Shiva that had remained dormant since Sati's death, emotions so powerful that their sudden emergence might have unpredictable consequences for both the ascetic lord and the cosmic order he helped maintain. The approach to Shiva's meditation site required careful preparation and precise timing. Kamadeva waited until the cosmic conditions were most favourable for his intervention, choosing a moment when the planetary alignments and celestial energies would support rather than interfere with his delicate operation. Vasanta began the process by gradually transforming the austere environment of Mount Kailash into a setting more conducive to romantic awakening, causing flowers to bloom among the rocks, birds to begin singing melodious songs, and gentle breezes to carry the fragrances of spring throughout the sacred mountain. As these environmental changes began affecting the atmosphere around Shiva's meditation seat, Kamadeva carefully selected the most appropriate arrow from his quiver, a shaft crafted from jasmine flowers and tipped with the concentrated essence of attraction itself. This particular arrow had been designed specifically for situations requiring the awakening of love in beings whose consciousness had transcended ordinary emotional attachments, its power calibrated to inspire recognition and appreciation rather than mere desire or passion. The moment Kamadeva drew his bow and took aim at the meditating figure of Shiva represented one of the most crucial junctures in cosmic history, for the success or failure of this intervention would determine whether the universe would continue evolving through the creative tension between consciousness and energy, or whether it would remain locked in a static state of pure transcendence that, while perfect in itself, would prevent the ongoing manifestation of new possibilities and forms. As the flower arrow flew toward its target, time itself seemed to slow, allowing every cosmic being with sufficient awareness to witness this pivotal moment when the force of love would either succeed in awakening the supreme consciousness from its transcendent absorption or be destroyed in the attempt. The arrow struck Shiva precisely at the heart center, its floral essence immediately beginning to work its influence on consciousness that had remained undisturbed by any external stimulus for cosmic ages. The initial effect was subtle but unmistakable, a slight stirring in Shiva's perfectly still form, the first movement he had made since entering his current meditative state. His breathing, which had been so refined as to be virtually imperceptible, began to deepen slightly, while his facial expression showed the faintest suggestion of change from absolute neutrality towards something that might eventually become emotional responsiveness. However, as the arrow's influence continued penetrating deeper into his consciousness, awakening memories and feelings that had been dormant since Sati's death, Shiva's reaction suddenly shifted from gentle stirring to explosive awareness of what was occurring. His third eye, which had remained closed throughout his meditation, suddenly blazed open with a fire so intense that it instantly incinerated not only Kamadeva's physical form, but also the very space where he had been standing, leaving nothing but empty air where the god of love had existed moments before. The destruction of Kamadeva sent shockwaves throughout the cosmic realms, for his function as the motivating force behind attraction and relationship was essential to the continued operation of creative processes throughout the universe. Without his influence, beings would lose the motivation to form the partnerships necessary for procreation. Artists would cease creating beauty, and the very impulse toward love and connection that drove evolutionary development would disappear from existence. The destruction of Kamadeva created an immediate crisis that threatened the fundamental processes of cosmic creation, yet this catastrophic event paradoxically served to awaken within Shiva the very emotions that the god of love had died attempting to inspire. The shock of recognizing how completely his transcendent detachment had isolated him from the creative forces of the universe penetrated his consciousness with devastating clarity, revealing that perfect spiritual realization required not the abandonment of relationship but its elevation to divine levels. This recognition initiated a gradual opening of his awareness to the possibility that his eternal companion might have returned in a new form, preparing the ground for the cosmic reunion that would eventually restore balance to both his individual nature and the universal order itself. The marriage between Shiva and Parvati, when it finally occurred after her successful completion of the most rigorous tapasya ever undertaken, established not merely a personal relationship but a cosmic template for how consciousness and energy could collaborate in the ongoing work of creation and transformation. Their union on Mount Kailash created an environment of such concentrated spiritual power that it became the natural setting for manifestations that transcended ordinary reproductive processes, giving birth to offspring whose very existence would serve specific functions within the cosmic hierarchy, and whose adventures would demonstrate how divine consciousness expresses itself through individual personalities while maintaining connection to universal purposes. The first of these extraordinary births occurred through circumstances that revealed Parvati's mastery over the creative forces that constitute her essential nature as the primordial cosmic energy. During a period when Shiva had withdrawn into extended meditation, leaving her to manage the domestic responsibilities of their divine household, Parvati found herself desiring the companionship of a child who would share her daily activities and provide the intimate family connection that even divine beings require for complete fulfillment. This desire, emerging from the deepest levels of her consciousness, carried within it the power to manifest reality directly through the focused application of divine will. Rather than approaching Shiva with her request and potentially disturbing his meditative absorption, Parvati decided to create the desired child through her own inherent creative abilities. The process she employed demonstrated the sophisticated understanding of manifestation principles that characterized her nature as Adi Shakti, the primordial creative force from which all other forms of energy derive their power and direction. She began by gathering the most refined substances available in their mountain realm, sandalwood paste that had been blessed by countless mantras, turmeric powder that glowed within a light, and various aromatic oils that carried the concentrated essence of spiritual practices performed over cosmic ages. These materials, when combined with the divine essence that naturally emanated from her own form, created a paste that possessed properties far beyond ordinary matter. The substance itself seemed alive, pulsing with potential energy that awaited only the proper intention and ritual application to transform into whatever form her consciousness desired to manifest. As she worked with these materials, shaping them with her hands while maintaining perfect concentration on her goal, the paste began responding to her mental imagery and emotional intention, gradually taking on the characteristics she envisioned for her future child. The form that emerged from this process displayed perfection that surpassed even divine standards of beauty and proportion. The child's features combined the best qualities of both parents while maintaining a unique identity that would enable him to fulfill his destined cosmic functions. His complexion possessed the golden radiance that characterized beings born from pure spiritual energy, while his eyes held depths that suggested wisdom, accumulated through countless lifetimes of experience. His limbs displayed the perfect proportions that would enable both graceful movement and tremendous strength, while his overall appearance conveyed the confidence and authority that would be necessary for his future role as the remover of obstacles. As Parvati completed the physical formation of this remarkable child, she began the process of infusing him with the life force that would transform inert matter into conscious, independent existence. This procedure required her to draw upon the deepest levels of her own divine nature, channeling through herself the very power that had originally brought the universe into manifestation. The energy she directed into the formed figure carried within it not only the spark of individual consciousness, but also the specific qualities and abilities that would enable him to serve his cosmic purposes effectively. The moment when consciousness first stirred within the created form marked one of the most significant births in cosmic history, for this child would become known as Ganesha, the Lord of Beginnings, whose function involved removing obstacles that prevented the successful completion of important undertakings. His awakening occurred gradually, awareness spreading through his newly formed body like dawn breaking over mountain peaks, each moment bringing greater clarity and recognition of his identity and purpose. When Ganesha first opened his eyes and gazed upon Parvati, the connection between mother and son established itself with an intensity that transcended ordinary family bonds. He recognized her immediately not merely as his creator, but as the cosmic mother whose energy had given him existence. While she perceived in him the perfect expression of her own creative power manifested in individual form. This mutual recognition created between them a relationship of absolute trust and devotion that would endure through all subsequent adventures and challenges. Parvati's joy in her newly created son expressed itself through lavishing upon him all the attention and affection that her maternal nature had been yearning to provide. She adorned him with the finest garments available in their divine household, decorated him with ornaments that enhanced his natural beauty, and spent countless hours teaching him about their family history, the cosmic functions that defined their existence, and the spiritual principles that governed their actions. Ganesha absorbed these teachings with remarkable intelligence, demonstrating understanding that exceeded what might be expected from someone of his apparent age. The domestic harmony that characterized this early period came to an abrupt end when Shiva emerged from his extended meditation and encountered the unfamiliar child who had taken up residence in their home during his absence. The ascetic lord's initial reaction reflected the natural suspicion that arises when established patterns are disrupted by unexpected elements, particularly in someone whose consciousness had been absorbed in transcendent states where individual identity and personal relationships fade into universal awareness. Shiva's approach to their dwelling place after his long meditation carried the energy of someone returning from profound spiritual experiences that had temporarily separated him from ordinary domestic concerns. His consciousness still resonated with the vast impersonal awareness that characterized his deepest contemplative states, making the transition back to individual identity and family relationships require careful adjustment and gradual reorientation. When he encountered Ganesha, who stood guard at the entrance to Parvati's private chambers with the confidence of someone protecting his mother's privacy, Shiva's reaction emerged from his temporary inability to recognize this being as a legitimate member of their household. The confrontation that developed between father and son occurred because neither initially understood the other's identity or legitimate claims to authority within their shared domain. Ganesha, having been created by Parvati and instructed to protect her privacy, saw in the approaching figure simply an intruder, whose presence threatened the security of the home he had been charged to defend. His dedication to this responsibility was absolute, reflecting the unwavering commitment to duty that would characterize all his future cosmic functions. Shiva, meanwhile, perceived in this young guardian an obstacle to his natural right to enter his own home and reunite with his wife after extended absence. His consciousness, still operating from the transcendent perspective that viewed individual identity as ultimately illusory, initially failed to recognize the deeper cosmic significance of this encounter, or the family relationship that connected him to the determined young protector who blocked his path. The battle that ensued between them represented far more than a simple misunderstanding between family members. Their conflict embodied the eternal tension between established authority and emerging power, between transcendent consciousness and individual identity, between the old order and new possibilities that arise through creative processes. Each combatant fought with complete conviction in the righteousness of his position, neither able to perceive the larger pattern within which their confrontation served necessary cosmic purposes. Ganesha's fighting style displayed remarkable skill and determination despite his recent creation, his movements flowing with natural grace while his strength seemed to increase rather than diminish as the battle intensified. His weapons appeared in his hands as needed, manifesting from the creative energy that had formed his being, while his tactical intelligence enabled him to anticipate and counter Shiva's attacks with surprising effectiveness. The young warrior's courage never wavered even when facing an opponent whose cosmic reputation should have inspired overwhelming fear. Shiva's approach to the combat reflected his nature as the supreme destroyer whose function involved the elimination of obstacles to cosmic evolution. His movements carried the precision of countless battles against demonic forces, while his weapons manifested the concentrated power of universal dissolution. Yet even as he fought with increasing intensity, some deeper level of his consciousness began recognizing qualities in his opponent that demanded respect rather than simple defeat. The climax of their battle arrived when Shiva, frustrated by Ganesha's stubborn resistance and determined to end the confrontation decisively, employed his most powerful weapon, the trident that could cut through any defense and destroy any obstacle. The weapon struck with irresistible force, severing Ganesha's head from his body in a single devastating blow that immediately ended the young warrior's resistance and left his form motionless upon the ground. The immediate aftermath of this victory brought Shiva no satisfaction, for Parvati's emergence from her chambers and her reaction to discovering her son's apparently lifeless form revealed to him the true nature of what had occurred. Her grief and rage at seeing Ganesha's decapitated body created cosmic disturbances that threatened to tear apart the very foundations of their mountain realm, while her accusations and demands for explanation forced Shiva to confront the reality that he had unknowingly destroyed his own child. The recognition of his error struck Shiva with devastating force, revealing how his attachment to transcendent consciousness had temporarily blinded him to the importance of family relationships and individual identity. His cosmic wisdom, which enabled him to perceive the underlying unity of all existence, had paradoxically prevented him from recognizing the legitimate claims and sacred nature of his own son. This realization initiated a transformation in his understanding that would influence all his subsequent relationships and cosmic functions. Parvati's demand that he restore Ganesha to life presented Shiva with a challenge that required him to exercise his creative powers rather than his more familiar destructive abilities. The process of resurrection could not simply reverse what had occurred, for death, once accomplished, creates irreversible changes that must be accommodated rather than eliminated. Instead, the restoration would need to involve transformation that honored both the reality of what had happened and the necessity of moving forward into new possibilities. The solution that emerged from Shiva's contemplation of this dilemma demonstrated the creative wisdom that operates when consciousness and energy collaborate in addressing cosmic challenges. Rather than attempting to restore Ganesha's original head, which had been completely destroyed by the trident's power, Shiva dispatched his attendants to find the head of the first creature they encountered, with instructions to bring it back immediately for the restoration ceremony. The attendants' search led them to discover a magnificent elephant, whose noble bearing and intelligent eyes suggested a being of unusual spiritual development. This creature's head, when removed and prepared for the transplantation, carried within it qualities that would actually enhance Ganesha's cosmic functions rather than diminish them. The elephant's association with memory, wisdom, and the ability to remove obstacles by sheer determination made it an ideal replacement that would serve Ganesha's destined role more effectively than his original human features. The ritual that united Ganesha's body with the new elephant head involved the application of spiritual principles that transcended ordinary understanding of biological processes. Shiva's mantras and energy work created the connections necessary for consciousness to inhabit and operate through this transformed physical form, while Parvati's creative power ensured that the integration would be complete and permanent. The ceremony required the combined efforts of both parents, demonstrating how their partnership could accomplish what neither could achieve alone. When Ganesha's eyes opened and awareness returned to his transformed form, the being who awakened possessed not only his original consciousness and memories, but also new capabilities that reflected the wisdom and strength associated with elephant nature. His enlarged head provided space for expanded intelligence, while his trunk offered a versatile appendage capable of delicate manipulation or tremendous force as circumstances required. His overall appearance, while initially startling, soon revealed itself as perfectly suited to his cosmic functions. The psychological adjustment to his new form occurred with remarkable ease, reflecting Ganesha's fundamental nature as a being whose identity transcended physical appearance. His relationship with both parents actually deepened through this experience, as Shiva's recognition of his error led to genuine remorse and a commitment to honor his son's authority and wisdom, while Parvati's fierce protection during the crisis demonstrated the depth of her maternal love and devotion. The cosmic implications of Ganesha's transformation established him as the deity specifically responsible for removing obstacles that prevent the successful completion of important undertakings. His elephant head symbolized the combination of intelligence and determination necessary for overcoming difficulties, while his experience of death and resurrection provided him with unique understanding of how apparent endings can serve as beginnings for new possibilities. These qualities made him the natural choice for invocation at the start of any significant endeavor, whether spiritual practices, creative projects, or major life transitions. The second extraordinary birth within Shiva and Parvati's divine family occurred through entirely different circumstances that demonstrated another aspect of how cosmic consciousness manifests individual personalities to serve specific universal functions. This creation emerged from the necessity of addressing a cosmic crisis that threatened the stability of the three worlds and required intervention by a being whose spiritual power and martial abilities could match the most formidable demonic forces. The crisis originated with Tarakasura, a demon whose spiritual practices and accumulated power had reached levels that enabled him to challenge the authority of the gods themselves. Through rigorous tapasya that rivaled the austerities performed by the greatest sages, Tarakasura had acquired abilities that made him virtually invincible in conventional combat, while his intelligence and strategic thinking enabled him to organize demonic forces into a coordinated threat that overwhelmed the defensive capabilities of the celestial realms. The particular challenge that Tarakasura presented to cosmic order stemmed from a boon he had received from Brahma as a reward for his spiritual practices. This blessing granted him immunity from death at the hands of any being except a son of Shiva, a condition that seemed to guarantee his permanent invincibility, given Shiva's status as the eternal ascetic who had shown no inclination toward family life or the creation of offspring. The demon's confidence in this protection enabled him to pursue his aggressive campaigns against divine authority without fear of ultimate consequences. The gods' attempts to address this threat through conventional means proved futile, as Tarakasura's combined spiritual power and divine protection made him immune to their individual and collective efforts. His victories in battle were so complete and his dominance so absolute that he began reorganizing the cosmic hierarchy according to his own preferences, displacing established authorities and installing demonic rulers throughout regions that had previously been governed by divine beings committed to maintaining universal harmony and justice. The desperation of the gods eventually drove them to approach Shiva directly, with requests that he father a son capable of defeating Tarakasura, but these appeals encountered the same obstacle that had frustrated previous attempts to draw the ascetic lord into worldly involvement. Shiva's consciousness remained absorbed in transcendent meditation that seemed to preclude the emotional engagement necessary for creating offspring, while his apparent indifference to the cosmic crisis suggested that he either failed to comprehend its significance or considered it beneath his notice. The solution to this dilemma emerged through the intervention of cosmic forces that operated beyond individual will or preference, demonstrating how universal necessity can compel even the most transcendent consciousness to participate in creative processes when the stability of existence itself faces genuine threat. During a period when Shiva's meditation had reached particularly profound depths, the accumulated energy of his spiritual practices began generating heat so intense that it threatened to ignite the very fabric of space-time throughout multiple dimensions of reality. This cosmic fire, rather than dissipating harmlessly into space, began concentrating and taking on characteristics that suggested the spontaneous emergence of consciousness from pure spiritual energy. The gods, recognizing the opportunity that this phenomenon presented, carefully gathered this blazing essence and transported it to a sacred lake, where the combined influences of water and earth could provide the stabilizing elements necessary for the energy to assume individual form. The lake chosen for this crucial process was no ordinary body of water, but a sacred reservoir that had been formed by the tears of cosmic sorrow shed during previous ages when universal harmony faced similar threats. Its waters possessed purifying properties that could transform even the most intense spiritual energy into forms capable of stable existence, while its location in a grove sacred to the Divine Mothers ensured that the emerging being would receive the nurturing influences necessary for proper development. When Shiva's concentrated energy made contact with these sacred waters, the interaction created phenomena that announced the birth of a being destined for extraordinary cosmic service. The entire lake began glowing with inner fire that illuminated the surrounding landscape without generating heat, while musical tones emerged from the water itself, creating spontaneous melodies that conveyed both martial power and spiritual wisdom. Lotus flowers bloomed instantaneously across the water's surface, their petals displaying colours that had never been seen before, and fragrances that carried the essence of victory over all forms of negativity. From the centre of this miraculous lake emerged Kartikeya, also known as Murugan, whose appearance immediately revealed his nature as a warrior sage capable of combining tremendous martial prowess with profound spiritual realization. His physical form displayed the perfect integration of strength and grace, with muscles that suggested tremendous power, while maintaining the refined proportions that characterized beings born from pure spiritual energy. His complexion possessed the radiant golden hue that marked those whose consciousness operated from transcendent levels, while his eyes blazed with the fire of determination that could overcome any obstacle or opponent. The 6 faces that adorned his head represented his ability to perceive and respond to challenges from all directions simultaneously, while his 12 arms provided him with the capacity to wield multiple weapons and maintain complex tactical approaches that could adapt instantly to changing battlefield conditions. Each face displayed a different aspect of his nature: wisdom, compassion, fierce determination, strategic intelligence, divine authority, and transcendent peace, enabling him to respond appropriately to whatever circumstances he encountered. His birth was immediately recognized by the 6 divine mothers known as the Kritikas, stellar beings whose nurturing care would provide him with the emotional foundation necessary for his cosmic mission. These celestial mothers had been prepared by cosmic forces to serve this function. Their own consciousness expanded to accommodate the responsibility of raising a child whose destiny involved confronting the most powerful demonic forces in the universe. Their combined maternal influence ensured that Kartikeya's tremendous power would be balanced by wisdom, compassion, and commitment to protecting rather than dominating those under his care. The weapons that manifested in Kartikeya's hands reflected his dual nature as both spiritual teacher and cosmic warrior, each implement serving functions that transcended mere combat to encompass the transformation of consciousness itself. His primary weapon, the Vel or divine spear, possessed the power to pierce through any defense while simultaneously awakening spiritual understanding in those it touched. This remarkable implement could destroy demonic forces while liberating the consciousness trapped within negative patterns, demonstrating how true victory involved transformation rather than simple elimination. The peacock that became his chosen vehicle represented the integration of beauty and power that characterized his approach to cosmic service. This magnificent bird, with its ability to consume poisonous creatures without harm and its spectacular display of iridescent feathers, symbolized how spiritual consciousness could transform negative influences into sources of beauty and wisdom. The peacock's proud bearing and graceful movement also reflected Kartikeya's own combination of confidence and elegance in all his activities. The cosmic warrior Kartikeya's emergence from sacred waters marked only one facet of how divine consciousness manifests to address universal challenges, for Shiva's nature encompasses aspects far more terrifying than even the most formidable martial prowess. Beyond his roles as the serene meditator and graceful cosmic dancer lies a dimension of his being that embodies the raw, uncompromising force necessary to maintain cosmic justice when gentler interventions prove insufficient. This fierce aspect, known as Rudra, represents the storm god whose wrathful manifestations can shake the foundations of existence itself, wielding powers so devastating that even other gods approach him with trembling reverence when circumstances compel his intervention in cosmic affairs. The 11 Rudras constitute the primary expressions of this terrifying aspect, each governing specific elements of destruction that serve the larger purpose of cosmic renewal and purification. These manifestations are not arbitrary expressions of divine anger, but carefully calibrated forces that target particular forms of corruption, stagnation, and disorder that accumulate over cosmic ages and threaten to choke the natural flow of evolutionary development. Each Rudra possesses unique characteristics and functions. their combined activities ensuring that no form of negativity can establish permanent dominion over any realm of existence. Kapali, the first of these fierce manifestations, governs the destruction of false spiritual authority and the elimination of religious hypocrisy that corrupts genuine spiritual practice. His appearance deliberately violates conventional expectations of divine dignity, his body smeared with ash from cremation grounds, his hair matted with substances that respectable society considers unclean, and his ornaments fashioned from human bones that remind observers of mortality's universal dominion. The skull that serves as his begging bowl represents the ultimate futility of material accumulation and social status, while his naked form demonstrates complete freedom from the shame and pretense that characterize ego-driven existence. When spiritual teachers become corrupted by power, or when religious institutions prioritize wealth and influence over genuine transformation, Kapali manifests to strip away these false coverings and reveal the emptiness that lies beneath superficial piety. Pingala embodies the fierce heat that burns away mental impurities and dissolves the psychological obstacles that prevent clear perception of reality. His form radiates an intense golden fire that penetrates through layers of self-deception and rationalization, exposing hidden motivations and unconscious patterns that distort understanding. This Rudra's eyes blaze with the unforgiving light of truth that cannot be dimmed by clever arguments or philosophical sophistication, while his breath carries the scorching wind that dries up the swamplands of confused thinking, where delusion breeds and multiplies. His intervention becomes necessary when intellectual pride creates barriers to direct experience, when scholarly learning becomes a substitute for genuine realization, or when the mind's tendency toward complexity obscures the simple truth that underlies all authentic spiritual understanding. Pima represents the overwhelming force that shatters crystallized patterns of behavior and thought that have become so rigid they prevent further growth and development. His massive form displays muscles that could crush mountains, while his movements generate tremors that destabilize any structure built upon false foundations. The weapons in his hands change constantly, each one specifically designed to demolish whatever particular form of stagnation he encounters, whether psychological habits that trap consciousness in repetitive cycles, social institutions that have outlived their usefulness, or cosmic structures that have become obstacles to evolutionary progress. His roar alone can cause avalanches that clear away accumulated debris, creating space for fresh possibilities to emerge from previously blocked terrain. Virupaksha governs the destruction of perceptual limitations that prevent beings from recognizing the multidimensional nature of reality. His three eyes see simultaneously into past, present, and future, while his ability to assume any form enables him to appear in whatever guise will most effectively challenge fixed assumptions and habitual ways of seeing. This Rudra specializes in creating situations that force consciousness to expand beyond comfortable boundaries, often manifesting apparent contradictions that shatter logical frameworks and compel direct intuitive recognition of truth. His interventions typically involve the systematic demolition of belief systems that have become prisons, the disruption of routine patterns that have induced spiritual sleep, and the introduction of anomalous experiences that cannot be explained through conventional understanding. Vilohita embodies the fierce compassion that sometimes requires the infliction of temporary suffering to prevent greater long-term harm. His red-tinged form reflects the blood-like essence of life force itself, while his actions demonstrate how apparent cruelty can serve ultimately beneficial purposes when guided by perfect wisdom and unconditional love. This aspect of Rudra manifests when beings have become so attached to harmful patterns that only shock and disruption can break their self-destructive momentum. When societies have become so corrupt that gradual reform proves inadequate, or when cosmic cycles have reached points where gentle correction would be insufficient to restore proper balance. His interventions, though often traumatic for those who experience them directly, serve the larger purpose of preventing far greater catastrophes that would result from allowing negative trends to continue unchecked. Shasana represents the implacable enforcement of cosmic law when voluntary compliance with universal principles breaks down completely. His form displays the absolute authority that brooks no argument or negotiation, while his weapons manifest the irresistible power that can compel obedience even from the most rebellious forces. This Rudra appears when the natural consequences of actions have been artificially suspended through magical manipulation or divine intervention, creating imbalances that threaten the integrity of the cosmic order itself. His function involves the restoration of proper cause and effect relationships, ensuring that every action eventually produces its appropriate result regardless of how powerful the forces that attempt to prevent such natural justice. Ajapada governs the destruction of time-based illusions and the dissolution of temporal limitations that trap consciousness in narrow sequential thinking. His form appears to exist simultaneously in multiple time periods, while his movements create paradoxes that reveal the artificial nature of chronological progression. This aspect of Rudra manifests when beings become so identified with their position in linear time that they lose connection with the eternal present that underlies all temporal experience, when civilizations become obsessed with either past glory or future achievement at the expense of present awareness, or when cosmic cycles become distorted through attempts to manipulate or control natural timing. His interventions restore proper relationship with the timeless dimension that gives meaning and context to all temporal activities. Ahirbudnya embodies the serpentine wisdom that operates through cycles of death and rebirth, governing the dissolution processes that enable consciousness to shed outgrown forms and assume new expressions better suited to current evolutionary needs. His serpent-like movements flow with the undulating rhythm of cosmic transformation, while his ability to shed his skin repeatedly demonstrates the principle of renewal through apparent destruction. This Rudra manifests when attachment to existing forms prevents necessary change, when fear of death creates stagnation that blocks natural development, or when the accumulation of obsolete structures threatens to overwhelm emerging possibilities. His wisdom encompasses the understanding that every ending serves as a beginning, every death enables new life, and every dissolution creates space for fresh manifestation. Shambhu represents the benevolent destroyer whose fierce actions serve ultimately peaceful purposes, demonstrating how apparent opposites can coexist within unified consciousness. His form combines terrifying power with unmistakable compassion, while his actions reveal the deep love that motivates even the most devastating interventions. This aspect of Rudra appears when the gap between surface appearances and underlying reality has become so extreme that only dramatic revelation can restore proper understanding. When beings have become so identified with temporary roles that they have forgotten their eternal nature, or when cosmic situations require the demonstration that destruction and creation are complementary aspects of a single process rather than opposing forces. Chandra represents the cooling influence that moderates the intensity of destructive processes, ensuring that necessary dissolution does not exceed appropriate limits or cause more damage than required for purification and renewal. His form radiates the gentle light of wisdom that illuminates without burning, while his presence brings the peace that follows successful completion of difficult, transformative processes. This Rudra manifests to regulate the activities of his more fierce companions, providing the discrimination necessary to ensure that destructive interventions serve constructive purposes and cease when their objectives have been accomplished. Bhava embodies the pure existence that remains when all temporary manifestations have been dissolved, representing the indestructible essence that survives every form of apparent destruction. His form appears as the simplest possible expression of conscious presence, while his stillness demonstrates the unshakable peace that underlies all activity and change. This final Rudra reveals himself when the work of his 10 companions has been completed, when all obstacles to clear perception have been removed, and when consciousness can recognize its own eternal nature without the distraction of identifying with temporary phenomena. The most dramatic manifestation of Rudra's protective function occurred during the legendary incident involving Daksha's yajna, when Shiva's grief and rage at Sati's death required the creation of a specialized aspect capable of delivering appropriate retribution for cosmic injustice. The being who emerged from Shiva's matted locks during this crisis became known as Virabhadra, a warrior whose appearance and abilities were specifically designed to accomplish the destruction of Daksha's sacrifice and demonstrate the consequences of insulting divine consciousness. Virabhadra's emergence from Shiva's hair occurred through a process that revealed the tremendous creative potential contained within the ascetic lord's physical form. As Shiva's grief intensified into righteous anger at the injustice that had driven Sati to destroy herself, the accumulated spiritual energy stored within his matted locks began responding to his emotional state, organizing itself into patterns that would enable the manifestation of precisely the type of being required to address this particular crisis. The transformation of hair into conscious warrior demonstrated how every aspect of an enlightened being's form contains the potential for infinite creative expression when circumstances demand such manifestation. The warrior who materialized from this process displayed physical characteristics that immediately communicated his function as an instrument of divine retribution. His height exceeded that of ordinary beings by several times, while his muscular development suggested strength capable of crushing mountains or stopping the flow of mighty rivers. His complexion possessed the dark blue color associated with cosmic forces that operate beyond ordinary natural laws, while his eyes blazed with fires that reflected the intensity of Shiva's anger at witnessing injustice perpetrated against cosmic order itself. His hair flowed behind him like a banner of war, each strand crackling with energy that could incinerate whatever it touched, while his breathing created winds strong enough to uproot ancient trees and level entire forests. The weapons that appeared in his multiple hands manifested directly from his consciousness, rather than being crafted through ordinary means, each implement perfectly designed for its intended purpose and imbued with power sufficient to overcome any defense that might be raised against it. Virabhadra's army materialized simultaneously with his own emergence, consisting of fierce beings whose loyalty to Shiva transcended any consideration of personal safety or conventional morality. These warriors, known as Ganas, displayed forms that combined human intelligence with bestial ferocity. Their appearances deliberately designed to inspire terror in those who had violated cosmic law, while reassuring those who remained faithful to divine principles. Some possessed the heads of lions, tigers, or wolves, their predatory nature channeled toward the pursuit of justice rather than random violence. others displayed multiple arms that wielded an impressive array of weapons, while still others manifested supernatural abilities that enabled them to move through solid matter, become invisible at will, or multiply their numbers as battlefield conditions required. The march of this supernatural army toward Daksha's sacrifice created disturbances that announced their approach long before they became visible to the assembled participants. The earth trembled beneath their feet with vibrations that grew progressively stronger as they drew nearer, while the sky darkened with clouds that formed spontaneously in response to the concentrated energy of their collective presence. Birds fell silent and fled from their path. Animals sought shelter in the deepest caves and burrows they could find, and even the elements themselves seemed to recoil from the intensity of purpose that drove this cosmic intervention. The actual assault on Daksha's yajna demonstrated the systematic precision with which divine retribution operates when cosmic justice demands correction of serious violations. Virabhadra's forces did not attack randomly or indiscriminately, but targeted specific individuals and elements that had participated in or enabled the insult to Shiva. The priests who had conducted the ceremony while knowing it deliberately excluded the supreme deity found their sacred implements shattered and their ritual fires extinguished. The gods who had attended despite understanding the injustice being perpetrated discovered their celestial forms subjected to humiliating transformations that reflected their complicity in cosmic wrongdoing. Daksha himself, as the primary architect of this offense against divine order, received the most severe punishment. Virabhadra's confrontation with the cosmic progenitor involved not merely physical destruction but the systematic demolition of the pride and arrogance that had motivated his actions. The warrior's superhuman strength enabled him to overpower Daksha's defences effortlessly, while his spiritual authority rendered useless any appeals to rank, status, or previous achievements that the defeated progenitor attempted to invoke. The decapitation of Daksha represented more than simple execution, but served as a symbolic demonstration of how ego-driven consciousness must be severed from its attachment to false authority and pretended independence from cosmic law. The head that rolled away from Daksha's body carried with it all the accumulated arrogance and self-importance that had enabled him to believe he could insult the supreme consciousness without consequences, while the headless body that remained represented the potential for regeneration and spiritual rebirth once proper humility had been restored. The complete destruction of the yajna itself eliminated not only the immediate insult, but also the precedent that might have encouraged other beings to attempt similar violations of cosmic propriety. The elaborate ritual grounds were reduced to rubble, the sacred fires were scattered to the winds, and the carefully prepared offerings were trampled into the earth, demonstrating that no amount of ceremonial sophistication could compensate for fundamental disrespect toward divine authority. Yet even in the midst of this devastating retribution, the ultimate purpose remained corrective rather than purely punitive. When the other gods prostrated themselves before Shiva and acknowledged their error in participating in Daksha's misguided ceremony, the ascetic lord's anger began subsiding, replaced by the compassion that always underlies even his most fierce manifestations. The restoration of Daksha to life with the head of a goat symbolized both forgiveness and the permanent reminder that cosmic humility must replace spiritual arrogance if further catastrophes were to be avoided. The manifestation of Shiva as Bhairava represents another dimension of his fierce protective function, embodying the terrifying aspect that serves as guardian of cosmic boundaries and enforcer of ultimate justice. Unlike Virabhadra, whose creation served a specific historical purpose, Bhairava exists as a permanent aspect of Shiva's nature, always available to manifest when circumstances require intervention by forces that operate beyond conventional moral categories. Bhairava's appearance embodies the raw power of cosmic consciousness when it assumes the role of universal judge and executioner. His naked form displays the complete freedom from social conventions that characterizes one whose authority derives directly from ultimate reality, rather than institutional recognition or popular approval. His dark complexion absorbs all light like a black hole, while his blazing eyes emit radiation that can penetrate through any deception or concealment to perceive the true nature of whatever they examine. The weapons he carries serve functions that transcend ordinary combat, each implement designed to address specific types of cosmic violation or spiritual corruption. His trident can pierce through multiple dimensions simultaneously, enabling him to track down offenders who attempt to escape justice by fleeing to other realms of existence. His drum beats rhythms that can shatter the foundations of false realities constructed through magical deception, while his fire consumes not merely physical forms, but also the subtle bodies and karmic patterns that enable consciousness to maintain continuity between incarnations. The dogs that accompany Bhairava serve as his scouts and enforcers, their supernatural senses enabling them to detect traces of cosmic crime that might escape ordinary perception. These creatures possess the ability to track violators across multiple lifetimes and dimensional barriers, their loyalty to cosmic justice making them implacable pursuers of those who attempt to evade the consequences of their actions. Their howling announces Bhairava's approach to those who have reason to fear his judgment, while their silence indicates his approval of whatever activities they observe. The most extraordinary demonstration of Shiva's power over fundamental cosmic forces occurred through his manifestation as Kalantaka, the conqueror of death itself, during the crisis involving his devoted follower Markandeya. This young sage had achieved remarkable spiritual attainment despite his youth, his consciousness reaching levels of realization that normally required multiple lifetimes of dedicated practice to accomplish. His devotion to Shiva had become so complete that every breath, every heartbeat, and every thought served as offerings to the cosmic consciousness he recognized as his ultimate reality. The crisis arose when the time appointed for Markandeya's death according to cosmic law conflicted with Shiva's recognition that this extraordinary devotee had transcended the ordinary limitations that make death necessary for continued spiritual evolution. The young sage's consciousness had become so identified with eternal awareness that physical death would serve no useful purpose, yet the cosmic mechanisms that regulate the cycles of birth and death continued operating according to their programmed parameters, creating a conflict between individual transcendence and universal law. When Yama, the Lord of Death, arrived to claim Markandeya's life at the appointed time, he discovered the young sage so deeply absorbed in meditation on Shiva that separating his consciousness from its object of devotion proved impossible through conventional means. The Death Lord's attempts to sever the life force that connected soul to body encountered resistance from the very cosmic consciousness that Markandeya worshipped, creating a standoff that threatened to disrupt the orderly functioning of death throughout the universe. Yama's determination to complete his cosmic duty despite the unprecedented resistance he encountered led him to intensify his efforts, employing increasingly powerful methods to separate Markandeya's consciousness from its physical vessel. The Death Lord's noose, which had never failed to claim any soul when its appointed time arrived, began glowing with concentrated force as he prepared to cast it around the young sage's neck. This weapon, forged from the essence of time itself and empowered by the inevitability of cosmic law, possessed the ability to sever the connection between consciousness and form, regardless of spiritual attainment or divine protection. As the deadly noose flew through the air toward its target, Markandeya's devotion reached such intensity that his individual consciousness merged completely with the cosmic awareness he'd been contemplating. In that moment of perfect union, the distinction between devotee and deity dissolved entirely, making any attack upon the sage simultaneously an assault upon Shiva himself. This transformation triggered an immediate response from the cosmic consciousness that had been the object of Markandeya's meditation, manifesting as Kalantaka, the aspect of Shiva that possesses authority over death itself. Kalantaka's emergence occurred with such explosive force that it shattered the normal boundaries between different dimensions of reality. His form materialized directly between Yama and Markandeya, intercepting the Death Lord's noose before it could reach its intended target. The cosmic warrior who appeared displayed characteristics that immediately communicated his supreme authority over all forces of dissolution and transformation. His height exceeded that of mountains, while his muscular frame suggested strength capable of wrestling with cosmic principles themselves, rather than merely physical opponents. His complexion possessed the deep blue colour that characterized beings whose consciousness operated from levels beyond ordinary divine awareness, while his eyes blazed with fires that could consume not merely individual forms, but entire categories of existence. The third eye in his forehead remained partially open, its radiance indicating the constant presence of discriminating wisdom that could distinguish between necessary and unnecessary destruction. His hair flowed in wild streams that seemed to contain entire galaxies, while his breathing created cosmic winds that could alter the orbits of celestial bodies. The weapons that manifested in Kalantaka's multiple hands were specifically designed for combat against abstract principles rather than concrete opponents. His primary weapon consisted of a massive club that could shatter the foundations of time itself, while his secondary implements included blades that could cut through the fabric of causation and arrows that could pierce the heart of inevitability itself. Each weapon pulsed with energy that transcended physical force, operating instead through the direct application of conscious will to cosmic law. The confrontation between Kalantaka and Yama represented one of the most extraordinary battles in cosmic history, pitting the principle of inevitable death against the power of transcendent consciousness that had moved beyond all limitations. Yama's attacks employed the full authority of cosmic law, his weapons drawing upon the accumulated force of every death that had ever occurred throughout the universe. His movements flowed with the inexorable rhythm of time itself, each strike timed to coincide with the natural cycles that govern dissolution and renewal. Kalantaka's response demonstrated mastery over forces that operated from levels beyond temporal causation. His counterattacks did not attempt to oppose death through superior force, but rather revealed the illusory nature of death's ultimate authority over consciousness that had recognized its eternal nature. Each blow he delivered struck not at Yama's physical form, but at the conceptual foundations that gave death its power over individual awareness, systematically dismantling the assumptions that made mortality appear inevitable. The climax of their battle occurred when Kalantaka's foot made contact with Yama's chest, the pressure of that divine limb immediately demonstrating the subordinate position that death occupied in relation to cosmic consciousness. the Death Lord found himself pinned beneath the weight of awareness that transcended all categories of existence and non-existence, his struggles proving futile against force that operated from dimensions where his authority held no meaning. This victory established Shiva's position as Mahakala, the great time that encompasses and transcends all temporal limitations, including death itself. The demonstration revealed that while death remained a necessary function within the cosmic order, its authority derived from and remained subordinate to the eternal consciousness that observed all changes without being affected by them. Markandeya's preservation served as proof that individual awareness, when perfectly aligned with cosmic consciousness, could transcend even the most fundamental limitations that appeared to govern existence. The cosmic implications of this event extended far beyond the salvation of a single devotee, establishing principles that would influence the relationship between consciousness and mortality throughout subsequent ages. The recognition that death's authority was conditional rather than absolute provided hope for countless beings who sought liberation from the cycles of birth and dissolution, while simultaneously confirming that such transcendence required genuine spiritual realization rather than mere wishful thinking or magical manipulation. Shiva's mastery over elemental forces manifests most dramatically in his relationship with Ganga, the sacred river whose descent from celestial realms to terrestrial regions required divine intervention to prevent catastrophic flooding that could destroy entire civilizations. The story of Ganga's descent reveals how cosmic consciousness serves as the mediating force that enables divine energies to manifest in forms that benefit rather than overwhelm the beings they are intended to serve. The necessity for Ganga's earthly manifestation arose from the desperate prayers of King Bhagiratha, whose ancestors had been reduced to ash through their encounter with the sage Kapila's spiritual fire. These ancestors, members of the Sagara dynasty, had committed the grave error of disturbing Kapila during his deep meditation while searching for a sacrificial horse that had been stolen by Indra. The sage's response to this interruption demonstrated the tremendous heat that accumulates within consciousness absorbed in profound contemplative states, his momentary glance incinerating all 60,000 princes instantly. The peculiar nature of their death created a spiritual crisis that transcended ordinary mortality, for their consciousness remained trapped in an intermediate state between life and death, unable to progress to higher realms without the purifying influence of sacred water. Ordinary rivers lacked the spiritual potency necessary to cleanse the karmic residues that bound these souls to their unfortunate fate, while the celestial Ganga possessed purifying power sufficient to liberate even the most spiritually contaminated consciousness. However, Ganga's direct descent from her celestial abode would have created forces comparable to cosmic catastrophe, her divine waters carrying energy and momentum that could shatter continents and reshape the fundamental geography of terrestrial realms. The river's celestial form contained within it the accumulated spiritual merit of countless ages, concentrated into currents that flowed with the force of cosmic principles themselves, rather than mere physical water. Bhagiratha's tapasya to compel Ganga's descent involved spiritual practices of such intensity that they began affecting cosmic weather patterns and celestial mechanics. His meditation generated heat that caused unseasonable changes in atmospheric conditions, while his concentrated devotion created gravitational effects that influenced the movement of celestial bodies. The cosmic disturbances produced by his austerities eventually attracted Ganga's attention, but her initial response revealed the magnitude of the challenge involved in safely channeling her divine essence into terrestrial manifestation. When Ganga finally agreed to descend, her announcement of this intention created immediate concern among cosmic administrators responsible for maintaining universal stability. The river's projected impact velocity and spiritual intensity threatened to create tidal waves that could submerge entire continents, while the purifying energy she carried might prove so powerful that it would dissolve not merely spiritual impurities, but also the physical structures necessary for terrestrial life to continue. The solution to this dilemma required the intervention of consciousness capable of receiving and moderating forces that operated from cosmic levels while simultaneously maintaining connection with terrestrial requirements. Shiva's matted hair provided the perfect medium for this delicate operation, its tangled locks possessing both the strength necessary to absorb tremendous impact and the spiritual sensitivity required to regulate divine energies according to appropriate proportions. The actual moment of Ganga's descent created phenomena that demonstrated the extraordinary nature of this cosmic event. As her celestial form began its journey from divine realms toward terrestrial destinations, her movement generated luminous trails that became visible throughout multiple star systems, while the sound of her flowing created musical tones that resonated through dimensions normally beyond auditory perception. The space through which she travelled became charged with purifying energy that began affecting the spiritual atmosphere of every realm she passed through. When Ganga's torrential force struck Shiva's hair, the impact created vibrations that shook Mount Kailash to its foundations, while simultaneously producing effects that transcended physical causation. The divine locks absorbed not merely the kinetic energy of her descent, but also the spiritual intensity that made her waters capable of liberating consciousness from the most stubborn karmic entanglements. The complex maze of tangled hair provided countless pathways through which her force could be distributed and regulated, preventing any single channel from receiving more energy than it could safely contain. The process of moderation that occurred within Shiva's hair involved the systematic transformation of Ganga's cosmic intensity into forms appropriate for terrestrial manifestation. Her divine essence, while retaining its essential purifying properties, became tempered by contact with consciousness that had mastered the art of existing simultaneously in transcendent and immanent states. This contact imbued her waters with additional qualities that enhanced their beneficial effects while ensuring their compatibility with the physical and spiritual requirements of terrestrial existence. The emergence of Ganga from Shiva's hair occurred gradually rather than instantaneously, her regulated flow creating the sacred river that would serve as a permanent channel for divine grace in terrestrial realms. The water that finally reached earthly destinations carried within it both the purifying power of celestial origin and the moderating wisdom of cosmic consciousness, making it capable of cleansing spiritual impurities while simultaneously supporting rather than overwhelming the life forms that depended upon it. The liberation of Bhagiratha's ancestors through contact with these sacred waters demonstrated the river's capacity to dissolve even the most complex karmic entanglements and facilitate the progression of consciousness toward higher states of existence. Their immediate ascension to celestial realms upon touching Ganga's flow proved that her purifying influence operated through direct spiritual transmission rather than mere symbolic cleansing, her waters carrying the actual power to transform consciousness at fundamental levels. Shiva's relationship with Halahala, the cosmic poison that emerged during the churning of the primordial ocean, reveals another dimension of his mastery over elemental forces and his willingness to sacrifice personal comfort for universal welfare. The churning of the ocean of milk undertaken jointly by gods and demons seeking to obtain the nectar of immortality, produced numerous treasures and divine substances, but also generated this deadly poison whose toxicity threatened to destroy all life throughout the three worlds. Halahala's emergence occurred at a critical moment when the churning process had reached sufficient intensity to bring forth substances that had remained hidden in the ocean's depths since the beginning of creation. This poison represented the concentrated essence of all negative forces that had accumulated over cosmic ages. Its toxicity derived not merely from chemical properties, but from the spiritual contamination that results when consciousness becomes completely separated from its divine source. The immediate effects of Halahala's release created panic throughout the cosmic realms as its vapours began spreading with alarming rapidity, killing everything they touched while simultaneously corrupting the spiritual atmosphere that enabled divine beings to maintain their elevated states of consciousness. The poison's influence operated on multiple levels simultaneously, destroying physical forms while also contaminating the subtle energies that connected individual awareness to cosmic consciousness. The gods and demons who had collaborated in the churning process found themselves equally threatened by the catastrophe their efforts had unleashed, their previous antagonisms forgotten in the face of universal extinction. Their combined attempts to contain or neutralize the poison proved futile, as Halahala's toxicity exceeded any defensive measures they could devise through conventional means. The realization that their quest for immortality might instead result in universal death created desperation that drove them to seek intervention from consciousness, operating at levels beyond their own capabilities. Shiva's decision to consume the poison himself demonstrated the principle that cosmic consciousness accepts responsibility for the consequences of universal processes, even when those consequences create personal suffering or inconvenience. His willingness to internalize Halahala rather than allowing it to spread throughout creation reflected the understanding that individual sacrifice serves collective welfare when performed by beings whose identity encompasses rather than excludes the well-being of others. The actual consumption of Halahala required Shiva to employ yogic techniques that prevented the poison from spreading throughout his system, while simultaneously neutralizing its destructive potential through the transformative power of enlightened consciousness. The process involved holding the toxic substance in his throat, where it could be contained without affecting his vital organs, while gradually being transformed through exposure to the purifying influence of cosmic awareness. The blue coloration that appeared in Shiva's throat as a result of this sacrifice became one of his most recognizable characteristics, earning him the name Neelakantha, or blue-throated one. This physical transformation served as a permanent reminder of his willingness to accept personal suffering for universal benefit, while also demonstrating how consciousness can transmute even the most destructive forces into sources of wisdom and spiritual power. The cosmic implications of this event established Shiva as the ultimate refuge for beings facing dangers that exceed their capacity to handle through individual effort. His absorption of Halahala proved that no force, regardless of its destructive potential, could ultimately harm consciousness that had transcended identification with temporary forms and conditions. This demonstration provided reassurance to countless beings throughout subsequent ages that divine protection remained available even in the most desperate circumstances. Shiva's mastery over serpents represents another aspect of his dominion over cosmic forces, his relationship with these creatures revealing his authority over time, death, and the subtle energies that govern the cycles of creation and dissolution. The serpents that adorn his form serve not merely as decorative elements, but as symbols of cosmic principles that operate through cyclical patterns and transformative processes. Vasuki, the king of serpents who coils around Shiva's neck like a sacred ornament, embodies the principle of cosmic time that regulates all universal processes through rhythmic cycles of expansion and contraction. This mighty serpent's presence around the divine throat indicates Shiva's mastery over temporal limitations and his ability to transcend the sequential progression that appears to govern ordinary existence. Vasuki's position also suggests the intimate relationship between consciousness and the life force that animates all manifestation. The serpent representing the Kundalini energy that lies dormant in individual beings until awakened through appropriate spiritual practices. The smaller serpents that serve as Shiva's armlets, anklets, and sacred thread demonstrate his complete fearlessness in the face of forces that inspire terror in ordinary beings. These creatures, whose bite could prove fatal to gods and demons alike, become harmless ornaments when worn by consciousness that has transcended the dualistic thinking that creates fear and attraction. Their transformation from potential threats into decorative elements illustrates how apparent dangers lose their power to harm when approached with proper understanding and spiritual preparation. The cosmic significance of Shiva's serpent ornaments extends beyond personal symbolism to encompass his role as the master of subtle energies that govern spiritual development in individual beings. The serpentine forms represent the Kundalini force that lies coiled at the base of the spine in human consciousness, remaining dormant until awakened through yogic practices that enable it to ascend through the chakras and ultimately unite with cosmic consciousness at the crown of the head. Shiva's ability to wear venomous serpents without harm demonstrates the state of consciousness that must be achieved before Kundalini awakening can occur safely, for this powerful energy can prove destructive rather than beneficial when encountered by awareness that remains identified with ego-based limitations. The serpent's peaceful coexistence with their divine wearer illustrates how potentially dangerous forces become sources of spiritual power when integrated through proper understanding and preparation. The Trishul or trident that serves as Shiva's primary weapon embodies his authority over the fundamental principles that govern cosmic manifestation, its 3 points representing different aspects of universal law that must be maintained in proper balance for creation to function harmoniously. This weapon transcends ordinary implements of war to become an instrument of cosmic administration, its power derived from alignment with ultimate reality rather than mere physical force. The first point of the trident governs the sattvic quality that promotes harmony, clarity, and spiritual development throughout the universe. This aspect of cosmic law ensures that evolutionary forces continue operating despite obstacles and resistance, gradually elevating consciousness toward higher states of realization and understanding. Shiva's mastery over sattva enables him to inspire spiritual aspiration in beings who have lost connection with their divine nature, while also maintaining the cosmic conditions necessary for genuine spiritual practice to flourish. The second point represents the rajasic quality that provides the dynamic energy necessary for creation, activity, and change throughout all levels of existence. This force drives the constant motion that keeps the universe alive and prevents stagnation from overwhelming creative processes, while also supplying the motivation that enables individual beings to pursue goals and fulfill their cosmic purposes. Shiva's control over Rajas allows him to regulate the intensity of activity throughout creation, ensuring that dynamic forces serve constructive rather than destructive purposes. The third point embodies the tamasic quality that facilitates rest, dissolution, and the clearing away of obsolete forms to make space for new possibilities to emerge. This aspect of cosmic law governs the natural cycles of death and renewal that enable evolution to continue progressing toward higher levels of organization and consciousness. Shiva's mastery over tamas enables him to ensure that destructive processes serve ultimately beneficial purposes rather than becoming ends in themselves. The trident's power to command these three fundamental qualities establishes Shiva's position as the supreme regulator of cosmic balance, his authority extending over every aspect of universal manifestation, from the grossest material forms to the most subtle spiritual energies. The weapon's effectiveness derives not from its ability to overcome opposition through superior force, but from its capacity to restore proper relationships between different cosmic principles when these have become distorted or unbalanced. The trident's capacity to maintain cosmic equilibrium through the regulation of fundamental qualities established the foundation for Shiva's emergence as the supreme teacher, whose instruction transcends conventional pedagogical methods to encompass direct transmission of consciousness itself. This educational function manifested most profoundly through his intimate dialogues with Parvati, conversations that would generate some of the most sophisticated spiritual texts ever revealed to human understanding. These exchanges occurred not as formal lectures delivered by teacher to student, but as spontaneous revelations emerging from the perfect communion between consciousness and energy, each question and response flowing naturally from their unified awareness of cosmic truth. The Vidyan Bhairav Tantra emerged from one such dialogue when Parvati, despite her own divine nature and unlimited spiritual realization, assumed the role of sincere inquirer to facilitate the revelation of practical methods through which individual consciousness could recognize its essential unity with the cosmic awareness. Her questions possess the precision that comes from perfect understanding rather than genuine ignorance, each inquiry designed to elicit responses that would benefit countless seekers throughout future ages who would encounter these teachings in their quest for spiritual liberation. The setting for these revelations typically occurred during moments of profound intimacy, when their individual consciousnesses had merged so completely that the distinction between questioner and respondent became meaningless, their dialogue representing the internal conversation through which cosmic consciousness explores its own infinite potential. The sacred mountain environment provided the perfect backdrop for such exchanges, its pristine atmosphere free from the distractions and limitations that might interfere with the reception of such subtle and sophisticated spiritual instruction. Parvati's opening inquiry addressed the fundamental challenge faced by all spiritual seekers: how individual awareness, apparently trapped within the limitations of personal identity and sensory experience, could recognize and realize its essential nature as unlimited cosmic consciousness. Her question encompassed not merely theoretical understanding but practical methodology, requesting specific techniques through which this recognition could be cultivated and stabilized until it became the permanent foundation of conscious experience, rather than a temporary glimpse achieved during exceptional moments. Shiva's response revealed 112 distinct meditation techniques, each one precisely calibrated to address different temperaments, circumstances, and levels of spiritual development that characterize the diverse range of beings who might encounter these teachings. Rather than presenting a single universal method that might prove unsuitable for many practitioners, his comprehensive approach acknowledged that consciousness manifests through infinite varieties of individual expression, each requiring approaches specifically adapted to its unique characteristics and requirements. The first category of techniques focused on breath awareness, recognizing that the rhythmic process of respiration provides the most accessible bridge between conscious control and unconscious bodily functions. These methods range from simple observation of natural breathing patterns to sophisticated practices involving the regulation of inhalation, retention, and exhalation in specific ratios designed to harmonize the nervous system and create optimal conditions for meditative absorption. The breath-based approaches acknowledge that most seekers initially identify consciousness with physical sensations, using this identification as a starting point for gradually expanding awareness beyond bodily limitations. Several techniques employed the gaps between breaths as focal points for recognizing the space of pure awareness that underlies all mental and physical activity. These methods directed attention to the natural pause that occurs at the completion of inhalation before exhalation begins, and the similar stillness that follows exhalation before the next inhalation commences. Within these momentary gaps, practitioners could discover the timeless awareness that witnesses all breathing without being affected by the rhythmic changes, gradually learning to rest in this witnessing consciousness until it became more familiar and accessible than the temporary phenomena it observed. Another group of practices utilize the sensations associated with breathing as doorways into expanded states of consciousness. These techniques involved focusing attention on the physical sensations of air entering and leaving the nostrils, the expansion and contraction of the chest and abdomen, or the subtle vibrations that breathing creates throughout the body. By maintaining unwavering attention on these sensations, while simultaneously remaining aware of the consciousness that perceives them, practitioners could discover the distinction between awareness and its objects, eventually recognizing that their essential identity lay with the perceiving consciousness rather than the perceived phenomena. The second major category addressed techniques based on sensory awareness, acknowledging that most individuals remain strongly identified with the information received through sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. Rather than rejecting sensory experience as an obstacle to spiritual realization, these methods employed the senses as vehicles for discovering the consciousness that makes all perception possible. The practices range from intense concentration on specific sensory objects to the cultivation of panoramic awareness that encompassed all sensory input simultaneously without focusing exclusively on any particular element. Visual techniques included practices involving sustained gazing at external objects such as candle flames, natural phenomena like flowing water or cloud formations, or internal visualizations of geometric forms, deities, or abstract patterns of light. These methods use the natural tendency of consciousness to become absorbed in visual experience as a means of transcending the ordinary subject-object duality that characterizes normal perception, eventually leading to recognition that the seer, the process of seeing, and the object seen are all modifications of a single conscious awareness. Auditory practices employed various sounds as focal points for meditation, including external sounds like flowing water, wind, or musical instruments, as well as internal sounds generated through specific vocal techniques, or discovered through deep listening to the subtle vibrations that occur naturally within the body and mind. These methods recognize that sound provides one of the most direct pathways into the experience of consciousness as vibration, leading practitioners to discover the silence that underlies all sounds, and eventually to recognize this fundamental silence as their own essential nature. Tactile techniques involve focusing attention on physical sensations, ranging from the contact between body and ground during seated meditation to the subtle energy currents that flow through the nervous system during various states of consciousness. These practices use the body's natural sensitivity as a means of discovering the awareness that registers all sensations, gradually shifting identification from the temporary physical experiences to the permanent consciousness that witnesses all bodily changes without being affected by them. The third category encompassed techniques based on emotional and mental phenomena, recognizing that thoughts and feelings provide some of the most compelling objects of identification for most individuals. Rather than attempting to suppress or eliminate mental activity, these methods employed thoughts and emotions as stepping stones toward the recognition of the awareness within which all psychological phenomena arise and dissolve. The practices included techniques for observing mental content without becoming identified with it, methods for tracing thoughts back to their source, and approaches for recognizing the space of consciousness within which all mental activity occurs. One particularly sophisticated technique involved maintaining awareness of the witness consciousness that observes all mental and emotional changes without being affected by their content or intensity. This practice required developing the capacity to remain present and alert during experiences of strong emotion or compelling thought patterns, gradually discovering that the awareness which registers these phenomena remains stable and unchanged regardless of what passes through it. Through consistent application of this method, practitioners could learn to identify with the witnessing consciousness rather than the temporary phenomena it observes. Another approach focused on the gaps between thoughts, using the natural spaces that occur in mental activity as doorways into the recognition of pure awareness. This technique involved learning to notice the brief moments of mental silence that occur spontaneously throughout normal consciousness, gradually extending these gaps until the practitioner could rest comfortably in the thought-free awareness that serves as the background for all mental activity. The fourth category addressed techniques based on the recognition of cosmic consciousness through direct inquiry into the nature of personal identity. These methods involved systematic investigation of the assumptions and beliefs that create the sense of being a separate individual, gradually dissolving these limitations through direct examination rather than through concentration or absorption practices. The inquiry-based approaches acknowledge that ultimate realization involves recognizing what one already is rather than achieving some new state or condition. The most direct of these techniques involved the persistent inquiry into the source and nature of the I, thought that serves as the foundation for personal identity. This practice required continuously asking, "Who am I?" or "What am I?" while refusing to accept any answer that referred to temporary conditions, roles, relationships, or characteristics that could change or be absent. Through systematic elimination of all false identifications, practitioners could eventually discover the pure awareness that serves as the unchanging foundation for all personal experience. Shiva's role as guru extended beyond these intimate teachings with Parvati to encompass his relationships with devoted followers whose spiritual development required different forms of divine instruction. The most dramatic example of this pedagogical function occurred through his interactions with Ravana, the 10-headed ruler of Lanka, whose extraordinary intellectual abilities and spiritual accomplishments were matched only by his equally extraordinary pride and ambition. This relationship demonstrated how divine consciousness could work with even the most challenging students, using their particular strengths and weaknesses as vehicles for spiritual instruction. Ravana's initial approach to Shiva reflected the complex nature of his character, combining genuine spiritual aspiration with the arrogance that would eventually prove his downfall. His mastery of the Vedas surpassed that of most gods and sages, while his understanding of cosmic principles enabled him to perform tapasya of such intensity that it threatened to disrupt universal stability. His 10 heads symbolized not merely physical multiplicity, but the extraordinary range of his intellectual capabilities, each head possessing complete mastery over different branches of knowledge that would require multiple lifetimes for ordinary beings to comprehend. The austerities that Ravana performed to attract Shiva's attention involved sacrifices that demonstrated both his spiritual dedication and his fundamental misunderstanding of the relationship between individual will and cosmic consciousness. His decision to offer his own heads as oblations in the sacred fire reflected his belief that spiritual achievement could be attained through extreme acts of personal sacrifice, rather than through the surrender of ego identification that constitutes genuine spiritual progress. Each head that he severed and offered to the flames represented years of accumulated learning and intellectual achievement, yet his willingness to sacrifice even these treasured accomplishments revealed the intensity of his desire for divine recognition. Shiva's eventual appearance before Ravana occurred not because the demon king's sacrifices had compelled divine attention through their extreme nature, but because his sincere devotion, despite its ego-driven motivation, had created sufficient spiritual receptivity to benefit from direct divine instruction. The form that Shiva assumed during this encounter reflected his understanding of Ravana's psychological needs and spiritual limitations, appearing as the magnificent cosmic being whose beauty and power would inspire both devotion and the humility necessary for genuine learning to occur. The restoration of Ravana's severed heads demonstrated Shiva's compassion for sincere seekers regardless of their spiritual limitations, while simultaneously providing an opportunity for instruction about the relationship between individual effort and divine grace. The healing process required Ravana to surrender his assumption that spiritual achievement resulted from personal accomplishment, opening him to receive the divine energy that could restore what his own efforts had destroyed. The teaching of the Shiva Tandava Stotra emerged from this encounter as Shiva's gift to his devoted student, providing Ravana with a vehicle for expressing his understanding of cosmic principles through poetic composition that would serve both his artistic nature and his spiritual development. The verses that Ravana composed under divine inspiration demonstrated his intellectual brilliance while simultaneously revealing his deep appreciation for the cosmic forces that Shiva embodied and controlled. The stotra's opening verses established the cosmic context within which Shiva's dance occurs, describing the rhythmic movements that maintain universal stability while simultaneously facilitating the constant changes necessary for evolutionary development. Ravana's poetic language captured both the terrifying and beautiful aspects of cosmic transformation, acknowledging that the same divine power that creates also destroys, that the force which brings new possibilities into manifestation must also eliminate obsolete forms that would otherwise prevent fresh development. The central verses focused on the specific gestures and movements that characterize Shiva's cosmic dance, each physical detail serving as a symbol for cosmic principles that operate beyond ordinary perception. Ravana's descriptions revealed his understanding that the divine form serves as a visible representation of invisible forces, enabling individual consciousness to contemplate cosmic truths through concrete imagery that would otherwise remain too abstract for effective meditation. The concluding verses expressed Ravana's personal devotion while simultaneously acknowledging the universal accessibility of divine grace for all beings who approach with sincere hearts and proper understanding. This recognition demonstrated that despite his pride and eventual fall, Ravana had achieved genuine insight into the nature of divine consciousness and its relationship to individual spiritual development. Shiva's manifestation as Dakshinamurti represented perhaps his most sophisticated pedagogical approach, embodying the principle that the highest spiritual instruction occurs through silence rather than verbal communication. This aspect of his teaching function acknowledged that ultimate truth transcends the limitations of language and conceptual thinking, requiring transmission methods that operate directly from consciousness to consciousness without the intermediary of words or symbols. The form that Dakshinamurti assumed revealed the perfect integration of youthful appearance with ancient wisdom, his physical features displaying the eternal youth that characterizes consciousness, unaffected by temporal changes, while his eyes conveyed the depth of understanding that comes from witnessing countless cosmic cycles. His seated posture beneath the banyan tree created an environment conducive to the deepest forms of contemplative instruction. The tree's extensive root system and broad canopy providing both stability and protection for the transmission of sacred knowledge. The four elderly sages who served as his students represented the highest levels of intellectual and spiritual achievement possible through conventional learning methods, their advanced age symbolizing the accumulated wisdom of lifetimes spent in study and practice. Their willingness to receive instruction from one who appeared to be their junior in years demonstrated their recognition that spiritual authority derives from the depth of realization rather than chronological age or accumulated credentials. The silence that characterized Dakshinamurti's teaching method reflected his understanding that ultimate reality cannot be captured in words or concepts, requiring instead a direct pointing to the consciousness within which all verbal and conceptual activity occurs. His instruction operated through the transmission of his own state of realization, enabling qualified students to recognize in themselves the same awareness that he embodied and expressed through his silent presence. The mudra that Dakshinamurti displayed with his right hand served as the only external gesture necessary to communicate the essence of his teaching, the specific positioning of fingers creating a symbolic representation of the relationship between individual consciousness and cosmic awareness. This hand position, known as the Chin Mudra, brought together the thumb representing cosmic consciousness and the index finger representing individual awareness, their contact symbolizing the recognition that these apparently separate principles are actually one reality, appearing as two through the limitations of dualistic thinking. The mudra's symbolic power extended beyond mere hand positioning to encompass the fundamental teaching that liberation occurs through recognizing the illusory nature of separation between seeker and sought, individual and universal consciousness. The elderly sages who witnessed this silent instruction experienced immediate awakening not through the accumulation of new information, but through the sudden recognition that what they had been seeking through decades of study and practice was already present as their own essential nature. Their transformation from seekers to realized beings occurred instantaneously, demonstrating that enlightenment involves recognition rather than achievement. This transmission through silence established a teaching methodology that would influence spiritual instruction throughout subsequent ages, proving that the most profound truths could not be communicated through conventional educational approaches, but required direct pointing to the consciousness within which all learning occurs. The effectiveness of Dakshinamurti's method validated the principle that genuine spiritual authority emerges from the depth of realization, rather than scholarly accomplishment or institutional recognition. The silent transmission of wisdom through Dakshinamurti's presence provided merely a glimpse into the ultimate teaching that Shiva would eventually deliver through his final cosmic function, the demonstration of how apparent destruction serves the deeper purpose of renewal and regeneration. This most profound aspect of his nature emerges during the cosmic phase known as Mahapralaya, when the accumulated complexities and distortions of an entire universal cycle require complete dissolution before fresh possibilities can manifest. During this ultimate phase of cosmic activity, Shiva assumes his role as the supreme destroyer whose dance of dissolution clears away every vestige of the previous creation to make space for entirely new forms of manifestation. The approach of Mahapralaya announces itself through subtle signs that become apparent to beings whose consciousness has developed sufficient sensitivity to perceive cosmic rhythms. The first indications manifest as a gradual cooling of the spiritual atmosphere that pervades all realms of existence, as if the life force that animates creation were slowly withdrawing from its various expressions. Stars begin dimming imperceptibly, their radiance diminishing as the cosmic fires that sustain them receive less fuel from the universal energy sources that maintain stellar processes. Planets show signs of atmospheric deterioration, their protective layers gradually thinning as the electromagnetic fields that shield them from cosmic radiation begin weakening. The biological systems that populate various worlds start displaying symptoms of universal fatigue, with reproduction rates declining across species as the creative impulse that drives evolutionary development begins turning inward toward dissolution rather than outward toward manifestation. Plant life shows reduced vigor in growth patterns, while animal populations experience subtle behavioral changes that reflect the shifting cosmic energies affecting their instinctual responses to environmental conditions. Even the weather patterns that regulate planetary climates begin showing irregularities that suggest the breakdown of the complex systems that maintain atmospheric stability. As these preliminary signs intensify over cosmic ages, beings throughout the universe begin experiencing psychological and spiritual changes that reflect the approaching transformation. Individual consciousness finds itself naturally withdrawing from external activities and turning inward toward contemplative states, as if responding to an invisible summons to prepare for the ultimate journey back to source. The desires and ambitions that previously motivated action begin losing their compelling force, replaced by a growing sense of completion and readiness to release attachment to temporary forms and conditions. The gods themselves begin showing signs of the approaching dissolution, their celestial forms gradually losing the radiant stability that has characterized their existence throughout the cosmic cycle. Their supernatural powers diminish as the energy sources that maintain their elevated status begin redirecting toward the dissolution process, while their consciousness naturally turns toward the transcendent awareness that will survive the coming transformation. Even the most powerful deities recognize their dependence upon the cosmic cycles that are now moving toward their inevitable conclusion. When the preliminary phase of dissolution has progressed sufficiently, Shiva begins manifesting his ultimate form as the cosmic destroyer, whose dance will orchestrate the systematic dismantling of all created forms. This manifestation transcends even his previous appearances as Nataraja, for now his movements must encompass not merely the regulation of ongoing cosmic processes, but the complete dissolution of the universal structure itself. His form expands to dimensions that dwarf galactic clusters, while his consciousness encompasses every atom of creation that must be withdrawn back into the primordial state from which it originally emerged. The Tandava that Shiva performs during Mahapralaya operates according to rhythms that surpass ordinary comprehension, each movement corresponding to the dissolution of entire categories of existence rather than individual phenomena. His initial steps begin the process of withdrawing the life force from biological systems throughout the universe, causing the cessation of reproduction and the gradual decline of all living organisms. These movements flow with the gentle precision of a master craftsman, carefully dismantling a complex structure, ensuring that each component is properly processed and returned to its essential elements rather than simply destroyed through violent force. As the dance intensifies, Shiva's movements begin affecting the fundamental forces that maintain atomic cohesion and molecular stability. His gestures create vibrations that systematically weaken the bonds holding matter together, causing solid forms to gradually dissolve into their constituent elements, while those elements themselves begin losing the characteristics that distinguish them from undifferentiated energy. The process occurs with mathematical precision, each stage of dissolution following naturally from the previous one without creating chaos or unnecessary suffering for the consciousness that inhabits the dissolving forms. The cosmic fire that blazes from Shiva's form during this ultimate dance possesses qualities that transcend ordinary combustion, consuming not merely physical substances, but also the subtle structures that maintain the distinction between different levels of reality. This fire burns through the barriers that separate material, vital, mental, and spiritual dimensions of existence, gradually reducing all differentiated phenomena to the uniform field of pure consciousness from which they originally emerged. The flames consume time itself, dissolving the sequential progression that creates the illusion of past, present, and future until all temporal experience collapses into an eternal now. The drum that beats in Shiva's hand during Mahapralaya produces sounds that operate as cosmic commands, each beat triggering specific phases of the dissolution process throughout different regions of the universe. The rhythm accelerates as the dance progresses, its increasing tempo reflecting the momentum that builds as each completed dissolution makes subsequent phases easier and more rapid. The sound penetrates through every dimension of existence, calling all consciousness back to its source, while simultaneously providing the vibrational framework that guides the orderly return of all phenomena to their primordial state. The serpents that adorn Shiva's form during this cosmic dance begin displaying their true nature as embodiments of time and causation, their movements creating the temporal currents that regulate the dissolution process. Vasuki, the great serpent around his neck, coordinates the timing of universal dissolution with the precision of a cosmic chronometer, ensuring that each phase occurs at exactly the right moment to maintain the stability of consciousness throughout the transformation. The smaller serpents that serve as his ornaments regulate more localized aspects of the process, their coordinated activity creating a symphony of dissolution that encompasses every level of manifestation. As Mahapralaya approaches its climax, even the gods who have maintained their existence throughout the cosmic cycle begin surrendering their individual forms and merging back into the universal consciousness from which they originally emerged. Their dissolution occurs not through destruction but through recognition, the sudden understanding that their apparent individuality was always a temporary modification of the one consciousness that alone possesses permanent reality. This recognition brings not terror, but profound relief, as the burden of maintaining separate existence finally releases and allows them to rest in the infinite peace of undifferentiated awareness. The final phases of dissolution affect the most fundamental structures of reality itself, as space and time begin collapsing back into the dimensionless point of pure potentiality that preceded their original manifestation. The cosmic dance reaches such intensity that Shiva's movements begin transcending the boundaries of form altogether, his consciousness expanding beyond any possible limitation until it encompasses the totality of what was, is, and could ever be. In this ultimate moment, the distinction between dancer and dance, destroyer and destroyed, completely disappears into the unity of absolute consciousness, recognizing its own eternal nature. Yet even as the last traces of the previous creation dissolve into primordial consciousness, this apparent ending contains within it the seeds of new beginning. The dissolution accomplished through Mahapralaya does not represent final termination, but rather the completion of one cosmic cycle and the preparation for another. The consciousness that remains when all phenomena have been withdrawn carries within it the accumulated wisdom and evolutionary development achieved during the previous cycle, ensuring that the new creation will begin from a higher starting point than its predecessor. Shiva's role as Mahakala, the great time that transcends all temporal limitations, becomes fully apparent during this cosmic transition. His consciousness serves as the eternal witness that observes the dissolution of entire universes while remaining completely unaffected by these apparently momentous changes. From his perspective, the cosmic cycles of creation, preservation and destruction appear as brief fluctuations within the infinite ocean of awareness, no more substantial than waves rising and subsiding on the surface of the sea. This transcendent perspective reveals the ultimate truth that underlies all of Shiva's manifestations and activities throughout cosmic history, that consciousness itself is the only reality, while all phenomena that appear within it are temporary modifications that arise and dissolve without affecting the essential nature of awareness itself. The cosmic cycles that seem so significant from the perspective of beings identified with particular forms and conditions are recognized as the natural play of consciousness, exploring its own infinite creative potential. The promise of renewal that accompanies even the most complete dissolution emerges from Shiva's eternal presence as Sadashiva, the eternally auspicious one whose very existence guarantees that consciousness will continue manifesting new possibilities throughout infinite time. This aspect of his nature ensures that the apparent ending represented by Mahapralaya serves as the foundation for fresh beginnings rather than final termination. The wisdom accumulated through countless previous cycles remains available to guide the development of new creations toward ever greater expressions of beauty, truth, and conscious realization. The philosophical implications of Shiva's cosmic functions reveal the ultimate non-dual nature of existence, where creation and destruction, manifestation and dissolution, individual identity and universal consciousness are recognized as complementary aspects of a single reality rather than opposing forces. This understanding transcends conventional religious and philosophical categories to point directly toward the fundamental truth that consciousness alone is real, while all apparent multiplicity and change occur within the unchanging awareness that serves as both the source and destination of every possible experience. Through his various manifestations as the eternal ascetic cosmic dancer, fierce protector, divine husband and ultimate destroyer, Shiva demonstrates that enlightened consciousness can engage fully with all aspects of existence while maintaining perfect freedom from identification with any temporary condition or role. His example provides the template for how individual awareness can recognize its essential unity with cosmic consciousness while simultaneously honoring the relative reality of the forms and relationships through which this recognition expresses itself. The eternal cycle that Shiva orchestrates through his cosmic functions reveals that existence itself is the play of consciousness, exploring its own infinite nature, creating countless forms and experiences not from necessity or compulsion, but from the sheer joy of creative expression. Each cosmic cycle represents a complete exploration of particular possibilities, while the dissolution that concludes each cycle clears the way for entirely new adventures in conscious manifestation. This understanding provides the ultimate resolution to all spiritual seeking, revealing that what every being ultimately seeks, whether called liberation, enlightenment, union with God, or return to Source, is simply the recognition of what one already is and has always been. The cosmic drama in which Shiva plays so many crucial roles serves the single purpose of facilitating this recognition in countless beings across infinite time, demonstrating through every possible means that separation from ultimate reality is always illusory, while unity with cosmic consciousness is eternally present and available. The mythology of Shiva thus stands as humanity's most sophisticated exploration of the deepest questions that consciousness can ask about its own nature and destiny. Through these ancient stories and their profound symbolism, seekers throughout the ages have found guidance for their own journey towards self-realization, while the cosmic principles embodied in Shiva's various aspects continue operating to maintain the balance between manifestation and dissolution that enables existence to continue its eternal dance of creative expression and conscious recognition.